Bergidaeus was hailed as the most formidable demon king in history, yet his downfall came not from a hero's might, but from his own rigid adherence to tradition. He had spent his life memorizing every law and obeying every ancestral rule as if they were divine fate. However, as he lay dying without dignity, he realized that the very protocols he trusted had orchestrated his ruin. The moment of defeat was paralyzing. The black flames Berge, once revered as the ultimate authority of his realm, failed to even singe the adventurers standing before him. His physical defenses, hardened through years of intense cultivation, were bypassed effortlessly by a blade that now rested deep within his chest. He had done everything by the book. He graduated at the top of the Demon King Academy, followed every doctrine to perfection, and built his tower exactly as instructed. He had even played the role of the mastermind flawlessly, kidnapping royalty and sparing heroes to let them grow, believing the Academy's teaching that heroes were merely livestock to be harvested at their peak. Reality, however, was far more cynical. As Berge lay bleeding, the hero explained that his sacred logic was a lie. The kidnappings weren't crimes, they were signals for quests. The towers weren't fortresses, but invitations for invaders. Every weak monster and spared life had simply served as a tool for the heroes to level up. His entire domain had never been a symbol of power, but a glorified farming zone for loot and experience. The heroes laughed, thanking him for the excellent equipment, and dismissed their own fallen allies as mere sacrifices for fame. Consuming by a rage that burned deeper than his wounds, Berge attempted to unleash his final power. Yet, before the energy could manifest, his head was severed. In his final moments, he sacrificed his remaining life force to trigger a massive explosion, swallowing the battlefield in light. When the darkness finally cleared, Berge was startled by the sound of thunderous applause. He was back at the academy, 15 years in the past, clutching his graduation badge. Fate had granted him a return to the start, providing the perfect opportunity to discard useless traditions and seek bloody vengeance against those who once mocked him. The glowing laws of the Demon King standard materialized before Bergidaeus, just as they had in his previous life, but this time he saw through the deception. When the moment arrived to swear his oath, Berge did the unthinkable and refused. He publicly denounced the sacred protocols as worthless trash, calling them a cruel trap designed to enslave demon kings while strengthening heroes for their eventual victory. His defiance sent shockwaves through the academy. In a single moment, the era's greatest prodigy was rebranded as the century's most dangerous madman. Archduke Arcane Blair was the first to explode in fury, slamming his hand onto the table with enough force to nearly split it. He roared for Berge's immediate execution, viewing the outburst as an unforgivable insult to their core values. The sheer intensity of the Archduke's rage made the entire hall tremble as if caught in a violent earthquake. However, Blair hesitated. He remembered Berge as a brilliant star, a student with flawless talent, and an academic record bordering on perfection. To kill him instantly seemed a tragic waste. Offering a flicker of reluctant mercy, the Archduke presented an ultimatum. Berge must either publicly apologize to the entire demon realm or face exile to the infamous Aryan region. The mention of Aryans sparked frantic whispers throughout the hall. Known as a graveyard for demon kings, this hostile dimension claimed dozens of lives annually without leaving a trace. Many felt an apology was insufficient for such blasphemy and wondered why the Archduke was offering a second chance at all. Blair reminded the crowd that Aryan was the most lethal place in existence, a void that had swallowed countless kings before him. Before the murmurs could die down, Berge accepted the exile with icy resolve, demanding the assignment immediately as if it were a prize. Stunned, the Archduke's composure finally crumbled. Realizing Berge intended to use this hellhole to prove the standard was a farce, Blair's patience vanished. He thundered the final orders. Berge was to be transferred at once, stripped of all top-tier privileges, minions, and preparation time. As the portal flared open, Berge was banned from returning until the region was conquered. Tumbling through the gateway, he accepted this fate as inevitable. Aryan was the very place where his future killers had first risen to power. In his past life, he had chosen this land out of arrogance, but this time, it would be the foundation of his revenge. Bergidaeus's past arrogance had led him directly into a fatal trap. The heroes of that era had exploited his blind obedience to the Demon King standards to annihilate him. This time, however, would be different. As he spread his wings and landed amidst the icy peaks of the northern continent's Urgis Mountains, he welcomed the biting cold. He was resolved that this existence would not repeat the last. Instead of letting the standards devour him, he would twist them to his own advantage. Back at the academy, the graduation ceremony had dissolved into absolute chaos. Gordon Derrick, who had prepared for the day with the meticulous precision of a drill sergeant, was in a state of profound shock. In the demon realm, the highest-ranking demon was traditionally assigned to serve the top-tier king, a position so prestigious it sparked envy hotter than dragonfire. To Gordon, Berger was a once-in-a-millennium existence, a descendant of demonic dragons destined to carve his name into history. He had often imagined them conquering dimensions together, with statues immortalizing their bond as king and loyal assistant. That idolized image shattered instantly when Berger publicly denounced the sacred standards as worthless trash. The memory hit Gordon like a freight train, leaving him unable to comprehend why his hero would cast aside their most sacred teachings. Now, trudging through the relentless snow of the Urgis Mountains, Gordon hauled packs that felt impossibly heavy, his face twisted in a mask of disbelief. He could not understand how his life had spiraled into disaster so quickly. When Berger finally noticed him, his expression shifted to genuine astonishment. He had been told that no demon would ever follow a traitor into exile. Gordon's composure eventually collapsed into a torrent of frantic questions. He demanded to know why Berger had caused such upheaval, why he had insulted the standards, and why they were now stranded in the continent's most lethal region. Berger responded with an infuriating calm that only fueled Gordon's frustration. When Berger tried to use humor to lighten the mood, Gordon's panic left no room for jokes. Watching his companion unravel, Berger recalled the confident warrior Gordon had been in his previous life. Realizing that explaining the truth of his time reversal would only worsen the situation, Berger chose to remain silent. Eventually, Gordon managed to regain his composure and offered a stiff apology, reaffirming his loyalty despite the lingering doubt in his mind. Relying on the doctrines he still trusted, he insisted that the fundamental first rule remained unchanged. They had to build a tower. However, Gordon argued that such a structure should be placed in a visible, accessible location rather than hidden within a frozen wasteland infested with ferocious beasts that made traversal nearly impossible for ordinary beings. He claimed that choosing this desolate spot blatantly violated every principle of the Demon King's standards and urged an immediate retreat. Berger Deus rejected the suggestion outright. With the stubbornness of an immovable pillar, he declared that the tower would rise exactly where they stood and nowhere else. Ending the debate, he produced the legendary tower seed and thrust it into the frozen ground. Since the seed required the blood of a demon king to awaken, Gordon's panic surged again. He accused Berger of trampling over sacred traditions, but Berger responded with cold finality, stating he had never sworn allegiance to those standards in the first place. This rejection of doctrine hit Gordon with crushing force. For demons, the standards were as essential as breathing. Denying them felt as unnatural as trying to fly without wings, unless one had endured something as transformative as death itself. Without hesitation, Berger sliced his palm open and let his blood drip onto the seed, asserting that Gordon needed to understand that the standards were utterly worthless, especially within the Aryan region. The seed absorbed the blood and erupted in a blinding red flare as a massive magic circle expanded across the snow. As the tower identified its master, Berger of the Black Flame demonic dragon clan, the revelation shattered the foundations of Gordon's beliefs. Berger explained that Aryan swarmed with heroes because they had learned to weaponize the Demon King's standards against demons themselves, which was why so many rulers met their end in this cursed land. When the dark, brooding monument finally fully manifested from the snow, Gordon stared in disbelief. Berger remarked that the standards deserved a new name, given they now served humans far better than they ever served demons. Inside, the tower offered only desolation. Upon entering the first floor, they were greeted by cold stone and a suffocating silence. Gordon inspected the empty space with growing unease, noting that a proper tower should be filled with traps and monsters, yet this one felt abandoned and stripped of every luxury a demon king was supposed to possess. Every subsequent level proved to be just as empty as the ones below. By the time they reached the 5th floor, the king's chamber offered no luxury, appearing as barren as the rest of the tower. Although Gordon reluctantly admitted the structure was currently a disaster, he insisted they strictly follow the second rule of the Demon King standards. This protocol required abducting a high-ranking royal, ideally a prince or princess close to the throne, to harvest the most potent emotional energy. After Berge gave him a nod of approval to speak, Gordon unfurled a map and pointed toward the kingdom of Coruscant, the closest realm to the Urgus Mountains. He argued that kidnapping their top-ranking princess would trigger immense fear and despair, fueling their growth. However, Berge cut him short. While he agreed with the necessity of a kidnapping, he revealed he had already selected a different target. Gordon's excitement at joining the mission vanished when Berge ordered him to stay behind as a guard. Still, Gordon tried to stay optimistic, convincing himself his leader had finally regained his senses after the stress of graduation. That fragile hope was instantly crushed when the target was revealed. Instead of Coruscant's prominent royalty, Berge had chosen Hildurin, the kingdom furthest from their location. Furthermore, he bypassed the high-ranking royals to target the 13th princess, a girl with virtually no political influence or presence at court. With unwavering resolve, Berge flew southward across vast territories until he reached the distant castle, slipping through a window into the princess's private chambers without hesitation. Though the mission felt strangely familiar, Berge moved with a specific purpose that defied every sacred demonic rule. Meanwhile, back at the tower, Gordon was consumed by panic, realizing his king had chosen the least strategic option imaginable. Inside the moonlit room, the princess stared at Berge in stunned confusion. When he confidently declared his identity and intent to abduct her, she didn't scream in terror. Instead, she responded with a soft, almost amused laugh. This reaction caught Berge completely off guard. Rather than shrinking away, the princess stood tall and appraised him with baffling audacity. He wondered if she truly grasped the danger or if she simply viewed demon kings as a joke. Despite his confusion, Berge maintained his imposing presence, yet he was entirely unprepared for her calm acceptance. She treated the kidnapping as if it were nothing more than a minor inconvenience. Her unexpected composure sent an inexplicable chill down Berge's spine. When he sharply questioned her motives, the princess simply shrugged, explaining that she had long suspected such an absurd fate might befall someone in her position. Berge warned her against any deception, feeling as though he were walking a fragile bridge over molten lava, but she calmly countered that plotting was impossible, since she had no way of knowing he would appear that night. Although her logic was sound, it left him feeling unsettled. Before he could dwell on it, she reached out and beckoned him to depart. Taking her hand, Berge soared back toward the tower hidden within the Urus Mountains. Upon their arrival, a visibly tense Gordon rushed to meet them. Berge instructed his assistant to place the princess on the 4th floor instead of the dungeon, noting that her lack of resistance earned her some leniency. As Gordon moved to comply, he mentioned an urgent matter that required discussion. Meanwhile, the princess sat on the bare stone floor of her new quarters, quietly reflecting on the reality of her kidnapping. Despite the lack of servants or comforts, a small smile touched her lips as she decided the situation might not be entirely unbearable. At the same time, Gordon handed Berge an ornate invitation to a welcome celebration at the Tower of Monsters, held for the newly crowned Demon King. Berge dismissed the event as a hollow display of posturing, yet he decided to attend because the stakes had become too high to ignore. Although Demon Kings rarely cooperated, the grim reality of Arian often forced such uneasy alliances. Deep within a dense forest, Berge finally met Draxen, a demon king who had ruled the region for 70 years. Draxen immediately treated Berge with immense contempt, looking at him like dust beneath his feet and mocking his disregard for tradition. Unbothered, Berge urged him to skip the theatrics and state his business. Draxen then revealed that Archduke Arcane had personally ordered him to monitor the newcomer. Berge responded with a sharp insult, noting that even exile hadn't cured the Archduke's arrogance, which ignited Draxen's fury. The older king tried to assert dominance with a humiliating command, but Berge stood his ground, questioning if Draxen even understood the reason for his presence. Draxen merely doubled down, insisting that Berge had violated their most sacred traditions. Berge silenced his opponent by pointing out that the very traditions Draxen worshipped strictly forbade demon kings from killing one another. To emphasize his point, he slammed his heel down, shattering the floor with a single thunderous strike. This display of raw power left Draxen frozen in shock, realizing too late how gravely he had misjudged his guest. Desperate to salvage the disastrous meeting, Draxen scrambled to bring up the Archduke's orders regarding the kidnapped princess, even though the official report wasn't due for another month. Berge responded casually, mentioning he had already taken a princess who was exactly his type before strutting out of the tower as if he owned it. Back at their own stronghold, Gordon was practically bouncing off the walls, showering Berger with praise for his unfiltered show of strength. Although Berger waved off the compliments, confident that Draxen wouldn't dare escalate the conflict now, he still warned Gordon to remain alert. He instructed his assistant to check on the princess to see if she could be turned into a valuable asset. Despite his outward composure, Berger felt a lingering unease. He knew that if the other demon kings united, they would pose a significant threat. Even so, he preferred facing death over bowing to those he despised and remained committed to rebuilding everything from scratch. Berger had initially thought that kidnapping a low-ranking princess was a bargain in terms of energy, but his confidence wavered when he checked his system panel. He was stunned to see the numbers had jumped to over 13,000 points. Before he could process this, a video message arrived from the Tower of Monsters. Draxen appeared on the screen, now strangely cheerful and cordial, offering congratulations and a gift. He claimed to admire Berger's achievements, hinting that his defiance of tradition might have a hidden purpose. This abrupt change in tone was deeply unsettling, but Berger had no time to unravel the mystery. Gordon suddenly burst into the room, pale and shaking uncontrollably, reporting that something was seriously wrong on the 4th floor. Rushing over, Berger stopped dead in his tracks. The once barren spare room had been completely transformed into a lush, vibrant garden where flowers bloomed and butterflies drifted through a flourishing internal ecosystem. Elemental spirits swirled around the princess, who stood at the heart of the chamber like a sovereign of nature. Creating such an extraordinary environment required a master of all 4 elements, a caliber of spirit elementalist found only once on the entire continent. In that moment, Berger realized the truth. She was not the 13th princess. With a sly smile, she confirmed his suspicion and revealed her true identity as Hernan, the kingdom's first princess, a revelation that would surely cause the realm to erupt in fury. Within hours, news of her disappearance spread through the royal palace like wildfire. The king, consumed by rage, swore vengeance against the demon king who had dared to touch his daughter. He immediately ordered the full mobilization of his army and rallied the most powerful heroes to ensure her return. As the situation spiraled into chaos, Hernan reappeared with regal authority, mockingly asking Berger if he was truly capable of handling her. Berger, a keen observer, made it clear that her enchanting appearance did not fool him. He had heard tales of a genius elemental witch with mana as explosive as a volcano, a level of power impossible to ignore. He was intrigued by how she had suppressed such an overwhelming presence, leading Hernan to dramatically reveal a royal heirloom ring capable of concealing her magical energy. She then fixed him with a piercing gaze, questioning if he intended to send her back now that her true status was known. Berger scoffed at the suggestion. Returning her would turn him into a laughingstock, shattering his fearsome reputation and his ability to harvest demonic energy from terror. Letting her go was never an option. Almost instantly, the system detected a massive surge of fury directed at him, causing his demonic energy to skyrocket to 19,000 points. The kingdom had clearly identified him as the culprit. To Berger, it mattered little whether she was the 1st or 13th princess. She was now his hostage. Meanwhile, at the palace, the king roared orders to annihilate the demon king and rescue Hernan. Despite his advisors' confusion regarding the perpetrator's identity and reconnaissance units pleading for patience, the king's fury remained uncontrollable. He berated his subordinates for their incompetence, while his daughter remained trapped in an unknown hell. An advisor reminded the court of a recent scandal in a neighboring realm, where a prince's abduction by the demon king of lust had unified the world and led to the demon's public execution. The realization that another demon king would repeat such a fatal error terrified those present, leading the king to confirm that a new threat had indeed emerged. Suddenly, a soldier reported detection of teleportation magic heading toward the northern Urgus Mountains. This news caused a wave of shock, as the kingdom sat in the far south, making the vast distance and the logistical implications deeply concerning. Inside the tower, Gordon expressed his anxiety regarding the inevitable arrival of the royal army. However, Berger remained perfectly composed, certain that the troops would never reach their gates. The journey involved crossing numerous hostile borders and natural obstacles that no nation would allow Hilduran soldiers to pass through. This left the king with only one remaining choice: hiring a hero's guild. Yet, The moment the Urgus Mountains were mentioned at the guild headquarters, the heroes refused the mission, viewing the request as a suicide mission. As Berge had anticipated, mercenaries driven by profit would never march towards certain death, which was exactly why he had selected that specific location. Gordon became increasingly awestruck by his master's strategic brilliance and his uncanny familiarity with the world of Aaron, almost as if Berge had lived there in a previous life. Meanwhile, the king erupted in fury again upon learning that no guild would take the job. An advisor clarified that heroes in Aaron viewed battles merely as job listings. If the risk outweighed the pay, they simply ignored the contract. To prepare for the future, Berge browsed the system store, but found that skeletal soldiers and reducing dimensional interference were prohibitively expensive. Resting on his throne, he acknowledged that his current energy was insufficient to withstand a unified hero force, and shadows of his past life's fears began to resurface. To solve this, he instructed Gordon to contact Draxen, intending to trade demonic energy for human currency. Despite Gordon's horror, since such energy is vital for breaking racial limits, Berge was certain Draxen would pay a high price. Eventually, Berge arrived alone at the fortress city of Hultun, disguised as a mercenary. Though the guards initially mocked his plan to head into the mountains, they quickly fell silent after he tossed them a gold coin. The guards' attitude shifted instantly, and they granted him entry. Once inside, Berge realized he required a guide, which led him to the Scarlet Hawk Mercenary Guild. In the dim, alcohol-soaked hall, members were busy dismissing rumors of a new demon king as nonsense designed to extort gold from the crown. When Berge suddenly appeared behind their leader, panic erupted as they demanded his identity. He merely smiled, noting their lack of information and deciding they would make suitable guides. A brutal confrontation broke out when the mercenaries chose to attack instead of talking. Moving with ruthless precision, Berge blocked a sneak attack as effortlessly as swatting a mosquito. When another warrior swung a massive hammer, Berge caught it mid-air, leaving the attacker stunned like a character in a martial arts movie whose strongest blow was stopped barehanded. Despite crossbows being aimed at him from every direction, he continued the fight without hesitation, seizing a large man and hurling him into the others like bowling pins. The leader watched in absolute terror, no longer seeing a human opponent, but a monster from a dark fantasy. Outside, the remaining mercenaries muttered in despair, wondering why their enemy never seemed to tire. It felt as though they were trapped in a boss fight against an opponent who ignored the rules of stamina. Once the others had finally collapsed, Berge approached the trembling leader with eyes glowing in the shadows. He promised the man his life on the condition of total honesty. Faced with a presence like a final boss looming over him, the leader begged for mercy and agreed instantly. Berge demanded to know the location of the slave market. Shaking uncontrollably, the guide led him to a massive structure secured behind heavy iron gates. Berge quickly observed that the market dealt exclusively in human captives, causing the leader to hesitate, unsure of his client's preferences. When Berge asked for something rarer and tossed him a heavy bag of gold, the man's fear was instantly replaced by greed. His demeanor shifted immediately, like a shopkeeper catering to a wealthy customer, as he led Berge toward a hidden section. Walking through the market, Berge noted how quickly the man recovered from witnessing his comrades' deaths. He realized then that humans and demons were remarkably similar. One chased money, while the other chased energy. Descending into the subterranean dungeons, the leader finally revealed the object of Berge's search. This move clarified Gordon's earlier confusion. Berge had come to purchase slaves, specifically non-humans captured by mankind. His objective was to acquire an elf renowned for unwavering loyalty, who could serve as a spy to destabilize the heroes. Meanwhile, back in the kingdom, Highland Cargill arrived to a warm welcome from the relieved king. Accepting the mission without hesitation, Highland vowed to rescue the princess and claim the Demon King's head with the bravado of a Shounen protagonist, starting a new arc. Back at the market, the traitorous leader inquired about Berge's specific preferences. Berge gestured toward a captive elf and calmly informed the leader that his mercenary companion would settle the bill. The mercenary reacted with explosive shock, protesting like someone watching a friend order the most expensive item on a menu using their wallet. However, a single cold stare from Berge silenced him instantly, forcing him into terrified compliance. Berge then instructed his associates to wait outside, explaining that he required a private inspection. Although the leader cautioned that the elf was as dangerous as fragile merchandise, Berge dismissed the warning and promised to cover any potential losses. Berge carefully examined the bound elf, noting how humans had reduced such a proud race to chained commodities. Sensing Berge's demonic aura, the elf felt a spark of anger, unable to comprehend why such a being would take interest in him. When Berge offered him a chance for vengeance against humanity, the elf was tempted but argued that demons were equally untrustworthy. Berge claimed to be different and proposed a contract, 50 years of loyalty in exchange for freedom and protection. He reminded the elf that, for a long-lived race, half a century was merely a brief interlude in an epic fantasy saga. The elf initially rejected the proposal, stating that trust was impossible because demons sought to destroy the world tree, the foundation of elven belief. Berge did not argue. He understood the elf's fear, which felt as unnatural as a villain calling a timeout mid-battle. Instead, he swore a sacred oath under the demon code, pledging never to harm the world tree and to honor his word as a demon. This oath carried a weight equal to the tree's sanctity. In return, he requested that the elf, Granada of the Maple Tribe, swear 50 years of service upon the world tree itself. Disturbed by the demon's peculiar sincerity, Granada agreed to the deal on one condition. He demanded to meet the demon king, who had supposedly authorized such a sacred oath. When Berge revealed that he was the king himself, Granada mocked the claim. He argued that no ruler would personally attend a slave market, especially since demon kings famously weakened when traveling far from their strongholds. With smug confidence, he offered a wager, promising 100 years of service instead of 50 if Berge could prove his identity, a reckless bet made moments before realizing a grave miscalculation. In an instant, reality shifted, and Granada found himself standing on the tower's 5th floor. Berge calmly reminded him of the 100-year commitment he had just made. As the truth sank in like an unexpected plot twist, Granada began criticizing the fortress as if reviewing a broken survival game. He complained about the empty lower levels and the overgrown, unguarded 4th floor, scoffing at the idea that such a ruin could withstand a hero's assault for even a year. When Granada declared he had no intention of serving in such a place, Berge released a crushing wave of demonic pressure. The force slammed into the elf like a heavyweight finisher in a fighting anime, pinning him to the floor without a single physical blow. As the terms of their contract resurfaced in his mind, Granada finally understood the terrifying truth. The tower sat in a region crawling with catastrophic monsters, yet none dared to approach, as if the volcano they lived beside remained dormant only because of the horror residing at its core. Accepting his fate, Granada bowed and swore a century of loyalty in the name of the great world tree. Expecting a grim first assignment or a chance for vengeance against humanity, Granada was utterly baffled when Berge simply instructed him to cook. It felt like preparing for a climactic boss battle only to be handed a grocery list. As he confusedly chopped vegetables in the kitchen, Princess Erin joined him, cheerfully offering help like a friend entering a co-op game mid-session. Soon, the group gathered in the 5th floor dining hall for a lavish feast that looked nothing like a typical demon's lair. Proceeding with caution, Granada asked about the girl, only to be stunned by the revelation that she was Princess Ernan, the kingdom's first princess. A fresh wave of shock washed over Granada, who had mistakenly assumed the girl was just an ordinary kidnapped noble. He expressed doubt about how such a barren fortress could survive the inevitable arrival of a hero, but Berge offered no complex explanation. Instead, he simply told the elf to sit and eat, revealing that he had specifically purchased him for his world-class culinary talents. As the princess smiled through the meal, Granada felt as though he had accidentally wandered into the wrong story. Once the feast ended, Granada expected his primary duty would be defending the 4th floor. Barry dismissed this immediately, arguing that if an enemy ever managed to cross the Urgus Mountains and reach that level, their cause was already lost. He then unveiled Granada's true mission. The elf was to infiltrate human society as a spy to incite chaos. However, Berge insisted on a test of skill first. Seeing a chance to reduce his sentence, Granada agreed to a wager where Berge would fight using only one hand and no demonic power. If Granada won, 50 years would be cut from his contract. Accepting the challenge like a character facing a rare power-up quest, Granada began the duel immediately. Berge quickly noted that the elf's techniques remained sharp and precise, despite his years of enslavement. He even suspected that the magical environment of the tower's 4th floor had silently bolstered Granada's physical and mystical strength. As the elf unleashed spells far beyond the capability of his kin, he warned Berge not to underestimate him, successfully summoning roots that bound the Demon King's leg. For a split second, victory seemed certain for the elf. However, a crushing, suffocating presence suddenly descended upon him. Even though Berge kept his promise to restrain his raw power, the sheer intensity of his aura made it difficult for Granada to breathe. The fight ended in a flash. A single, decisive blow from Berge dropped the elf to the ground, proving the gap between them was wider than Granada had ever imagined. The narrative then shifted to the city of Horton Walk, the headquarters of the Red Hawk mercenaries. The warriors welcomed Berge with the respectful warmth of employees, greeting a strict boss who had finally returned with a smile. When Berge announced his intention to hire the entire guild for a full year, their captain accepted without hesitation, immediately inquiring about the terms of payment. One mercenary grumbled under his breath, clearly annoyed by how quickly their captain bowed to the man who had recently defeated them. However, the atmosphere shifted the moment Berge placed a heavy sack of gold on the table. The sound of the coins instantly ignited the mercenaries' enthusiasm, and they swore their loyalty without further hesitation. Their captain even privately considered upgrading the team's strength by replacing some members later on. Berge then introduced the man standing beside him as a new recruit who would be responsible for relaying all future instructions. Although the group initially hesitated, their suspicion turned to sympathy when Granada stepped forward. Seeing his bruised and swollen face, the mercenaries welcomed him like a long-lost brother, recognizing that he had suffered under Berge just as they had. This shared trauma bonded them more effectively than any formal introduction. Watching the exchange, Berge noted that despite their rough edges, these veterans possessed valuable experience that would be difficult to replace. His focus then shifted to the only hero who had answered the kingdom's call, the warrior renowned for slaying the Demon King of Lust. Now in command of the guild, Berge revealed their first mission, which was to gather every possible fragment of information regarding this hero currently serving the Hilderin crown. The mercenaries stood tall, their determination evident as they accepted the task. With the assignment set, Berge departed Horton Walk and headed back to his tower, already calculating his next move like a tactician preparing a dramatic cliffhanger. After charging Granada with overseeing the investigation, Berge turned his attention to his own growth. Since he had already exhausted the demonic energy points required to reinforce the tower or empower himself, he was left with only one alternative. He decided to hunt for a soul flower, a rare monocrystal created through years of absorbing natural energy. He believed the Urghaus Mountains were the perfect searching ground, as fierce mana storms and lethal monsters had kept humans away for centuries, preserving the land's resources. While soul flowers were less potent than pure demonic energy, Berge considered them far better than nothing. Gordon, however, warned that finding one was like searching for a needle in a mountain-sized haystack, especially with monsters ready to strike at the first sign of weakness. Berge countered that the creatures weren't the primary concern. The real difficulty lay in locating the flowers without advanced mana detection. Their strategy session was suddenly interrupted by a soft knock as Princess Ernan peeked in, a small blue slime bouncing happily on her head like a living accessory. Both Berge and Gordon flinched at the unexpected sight. With a shy smile, the princess admitted that she had never expected to leave the palace walls and felt grateful for the opportunity. Before she could say more, Berge lifted her up and instructed her to hold on as he launched them into the sky. They shot upward at a breathtaking speed, leaving the ground far behind. From their high vantage point, Ernan gazed down in awe, feeling like a first-time traveler staring out of an airplane window. The clouds, the sunrise, and the vast open landscape all felt surreal to her. She thought back to her repetitive life at the palace, which consisted of nothing but magic training and history lessons. Soaring above the Urghaus Mountains made her feel as though she had finally stepped into a real adventure. Berge, however, ignored her daydreaming and reminded her of their mission. She asked him to use her name since they would be spending so much time together, and he agreed, though he warned her that failing to locate the soul flowers would result in punishment. Ernan immediately apologized and summoned her wind and water spirits to begin the search. While Berge expected the process to take time, he knew her magical detection far surpassed searching blindly. Suddenly, Ernan cried out that she had found something. As Berge descended rapidly, he spotted a cluster of monsters surrounding a glowing plant. He identified these massive creatures as a demonic race that had long ago strayed from the demon realm. Acting as their king, he ordered them to step aside and leave the flower alone, but they refused. Their intense hatred for humanity led them to declare their intent to kill him instead. Berge let out a cold laugh, realizing Gordon was right. Trying to reason with monsters was pointless. He incinerated them without hesitation, even as they fought back with desperate ferocity to defend their territory. Their screams were soon drowned out by the roar of the spreading flames. When one creature ordered a frenzied charge toward Hernan, Berge annihilated the threat with a single burst of fire. Despite the chaos, Hernan remained calm. She knew that even powerful ogres could be defeated through coordination, yet these monsters failed to even get close to her. Berge unleashed a final, massive surge of demonic energy that erased everything in their path. When the smoke cleared, Hernan stared at him with eyes shining in amazement. Berge remarked dryly that humans only truly understood power once they saw it firsthand. It was then that she noticed a ruby-colored spiritual flower buried in the snow, radiating pure ice and water mana. Beria, seeing her expression, warned her not to get greedy. Promising a reward for any further discoveries, Berge watched as Hernan searched the area until she eventually succumbed to exhaustion without finding more flowers. Back at the tower, he reflected on her true identity. While saving the first princess of Hilderin had initially felt like a blunder, she was proving to be far more resourceful than he had anticipated. The calm was broken when Gordon arrived with an update from Granada. Hylan and a group of 32 heroes had departed the capital. True to the Demon King standard, they weren't rushing toward the mountains. Instead, they were taking the long route, completing village quests and leveling up along the way. When Gordon presented a series of defensive strategies, Berge dismissed them with a casual toss, much to his assistant's shock. He explained his refusal to place a single obstacle in their path, arguing that minor challenges only serve to forge stronger enemies. Instead, he ordered the mercenaries to join the hero's party to win their trust from within. Gordon privately lamented his master's total disregard for common sense, worrying about the tower's lack of defenses. Berge reassured him that reinforcements were coming, but Gordon's protests flared up again when he learned a dwarf would be recruited. He argued that housing a human, an elf, and a dwarf together would make their lair a laughingstock. Berge ignored the complaint, clarifying that the dwarf himself wasn't the goal, but rather the superior magical artillery only their kin could forge. His logic was ruthless. Heroes always expected weak monsters on the first floor, so he planned to greet them with rows of cannons instead. Realizing the devastating nature of such an unprecedented ambush, a stunned Gordon remarked that the plan violated every established rule of engagement. The perspective then shifted to the subterranean city of Wulfner, where the master blacksmith Lager Friedrich worked his forge, unaware he was Beria's next target. Entering the bustling dwarven city in disguise, Beria recalled his past life spent fighting dwarves, though he had never actually visited their home. He eventually stepped into the Midnight Inn and handed over a payment to a local, explaining that he wished to commission a weapon but lacked a starting point. Impressed by the human's business-like approach, the man laughed and agreed to direct him to the most exceptional blacksmith in the city. Berge responded by noting he had heard dwarves shared the same obsession with gold as heroes. Smiling, the man advised him to venture deeper into the city toward a massive, unmistakable opening where he was to board a lift. This transport served as a two-step security measure designed to screen for intruders before granting access to the specific floors. He instructed Beria to head to the very bottom, to the deepest chamber, where he would find the city's premier blacksmith, Lager Friedrich. Following these directions, Beria eventually reached Lager's domain. Watching the forge in action, he marveled at the metallurgy, which made the molten metal appear to be dancing. While questioning if Lager truly earned his reputation, Beria considered how much simpler it would be to just abduct him quietly. However, as he reached out to grab the dwarf's shoulder, Lager sensed his presence and swung his hammer with explosive force. The sheer pressure of the dwarf's aura erupted, hurling Beria backward. It became clear that Lager had detected even the faint trace of demonic energy, proving he was more formidable than anticipated. As Lager charged again, Beria caught the hammer mid-swing and realized the blacksmith possessed the power of a hero. Lager loudly confirmed this identity, condemning Beria for daring to trespass on dwarven soil as a demon. Smirking, Beria dismissed the dwarf's bravado as weakness and revealed his true status as a demon king. He then seized Lager by the throat, ignoring his groans of pain. When soldiers rushed toward the noise to check on the blacksmith, they found the forge empty. panic quickly spread as they sealed the exits and launched a full-scale search for the intruder. High above the city, Beria held the captive dwarf and threatened him with instant death if he made a sound. Terrified, Lager assumed the Demon King had come to kidnap their princess, but Beria dismissed the idea, stating she did not interest him. Lager insisted this was a lie, even as Berger brought up rumors regarding the secret underground escape tunnels dwarves dug for emergencies. Grinding his teeth through his tears, the blacksmith remained convinced that the princess was the only logical target for such a dangerous being. Cursing his own misfortune, Lager lamented that he had only survived in peace because he avoided confronting demon kings. It was clear that the blacksmith was fundamentally weak, leading Berger to conclude that extracting information through force would be a tedious process. Instead, Beria proposed an alternative. He would kidnap the princess and spare Lager's life, provided the dwarf acted as his guide. The proposal left Lager in a state of shock as he envisioned the devastating impact of such a betrayal. He imagined a rumor spreading that a selfish hero had sold out his own princess to save his skin, a story that would permanently ruin his reputation among the dwarves. Despairing, he cursed Beria as a vile creature, realizing that since his weakness was well known, people would easily believe the worst of him. Beria then forced a choice, telling him he could either betray the princess or face the consequences under his own power. Knowing the dwarf would choose betrayal to avoid torture, Berger promised to guarantee his safety by swearing a sacred vow upon the Demon King's standards. Believing such an oath was unbreakable, Lager forced a dramatic, unsettling smile and agreed to lead the way through the secret tunnels. While knights searched the forge for the missing blacksmith, Princess Lewis of the Dwarven Kingdom stood nearby in a strange outfit, crying over her unfinished weapon. When a knight suggested that Lager might have been kidnapped, Lewis angrily silenced him. She argued that since Lager was a hero, his abduction made no sense, but the knight clarified that being a blacksmith had left him with little actual combat ability. Infuriated, she ordered her men to find the culprit immediately, threatening to personally behead them if they failed to bring the kidnapper before her. Meanwhile, the scene shifted to the cramped secret passage where Lager led the way. Forced to follow closely behind, Beria grew increasingly irritated by the constant sight of the dwarf's large backside in the narrow tunnel. He complained about the unpleasant view, but a trembling Lager urged him to be patient, explaining that the tight space made the situation unavoidable and promising they were nearly at their destination. Despite his bulky frame, Lager was ordered to pick up the pace. He eventually exited the tunnel and guided Berger to a castle, where he declared his mission complete. Trembling, the dwarf claimed that by revealing the secret passage, he had fulfilled his end of the bargain and was now free to go. Berger's expression darkened as he dismissed this claim as absurd. When a terrified Lager reminded him of the sacred vow made upon the Demon King's standards, Berger merely smirked, stating he didn't care about the oath at all. Breaking down in tears, Lager questioned Beria's nature as a Demon King, while Beria casually pondered what to do with him next. Regretting that he hadn't betrayed the princess sooner, Lager lowered his head and began boasting about his unparalleled metallurgy skills. He promised to forge any weapon Berger desired, leading the Demon King to remark on the irony of a hero so willingly serving his natural enemy. Lager argued that such an arrangement was perfectly normal, and even offered to act as a spy. Beria finally stated that if Lager swore total allegiance, his life would be spared. Though Lager praised his new master aloud, he secretly mocked Beria as a fool, convinced he would never actually obey. The scene shifted to the 4th floor of the tower, where Lager stood as stiff as a statue upon arrival. A terrified Gordon exclaimed that the Demon King had brought back a dwarven hero, but Berger quickly silenced him. When Granada checked in to deliver a report, he too reacted with shock at the dwarf's presence, though Berger told him to wait. Princess Hernan then addressed Lager, asking if he had come to rescue her before dryly concluding that he probably hadn't. Confused, Lager reminded Berger of the promise of freedom, but Berger calmly clarified that no such promise existed, only a guarantee of mercy. Since Lager was still breathing, that mercy had been granted. Meanwhile, preparations for the hero's journey continued at the station. Granada finally delivered his report via a shimmering holographic link, explaining with steady composure that specific rumors were spreading among the adventurers. Intelligence indicated that the heroes, believing the new Demon King wielded black flames, were already equipping themselves with fire-resistant gear. Granada added that many also believed the Demon King's refusal to unleash demonic beasts was a sign of cowardice rather than strategy. interpreting his silence as pure weakness. In their view, Bergie's restraint was a sign of hesitation rather than a calculated move. He listened to the reports without a visible reaction, his posture remaining perfectly still and his expression unreadable. When he finally spoke, his judgment was cold. He believed the hero's murderous intent remained unchanged. He then issued a final directive, ordering Granada to monitor the heroes and report any developments immediately before the connection severed. Left alone, Bergie reflected on the strategy of withholding demonic beasts, which was methodically eroding the heroes' morale and distorting their expectations. He was deeply unsettled by the realization that this demon king possessed a profound understanding of human psychology, wondering if such a figure had ever existed before. A rare chill ran through him, though he felt a brief sense of relief knowing this individual was not his enemy. The scene then shifted to the cold, oppressive interior of the tower, where Berge gave new orders to the blacksmith, Lager Friedrich. He demanded the installation of fire cannons on the first floor, but strictly forbade the use of mana stones. This command sent Lager into an immediate panic, as constructing such weapons without mana stones was nearly impossible, and their effectiveness would be severely weakened. Berge silenced the dwarf's resistance, declaring that finding a solution was the blacksmith's sole responsibility. He explained that heroes were favored by the dimension itself, granting them an unnatural sensitivity to energy. Any trap powered by mana would be detected long before it could be triggered. When Lager attempted to object again, Berge's demeanor darkened. As a sphere of black magic formed in his hand, he reminded the dwarf that while he was considered the greatest blacksmith, he was not irreplaceable. Emotionally crushed, Lager hastily revealed an alternative. He had once spent 3 years developing a prototype capable of completely erasing mana traces, which was still hidden in his workshop in the kingdom of Wulfner. Suspecting a desperate lie, Berge demanded confirmation of the story. A trembling, tearful Lager swore he was being honest. After a brief consideration, Berge chose to believe him, but took a grim precaution by securing a purple, rune-etched collar around the dwarf's neck. He casually explained that the device could decapitate the wearer instantly with a single gesture and also distorted perception, preventing others from recognizing Lager's face. Immediate death would follow any attempt to remove the restraint, as it would be interpreted as an escape attempt. Realizing he had no other choice, Lager collapsed and swore his absolute obedience to Berge. The two then departed, traveling through various kingdoms for nearly a month to gather rare components and compatible materials, all of which Berge carefully stored within a spatial pocket. Their journey eventually led them back to the dwarven kingdom of Wulfner, where they found the city in total disarray. A massive boulder suddenly crashed near a group of dwarves, shattering into debris and revealing a furious Princess Louis at the center of the chaos. 6 weeks had passed with no sign of Lager's whereabouts. When an elderly dwarf nervously suggested that the blacksmith might have used his numerous secret tunnels to escape, Louis dismissed the idea. She was convinced he had been kidnapped and, in a violent outburst, gave the dwarves a 2-week deadline to find him or face extermination. As the soldiers scrambled to collapse every tunnel Lager had ever built, a hidden section of the wall behind the princess shifted silently. Louis immediately sensed the disturbance and turned toward one of Lager's secret passages. Although the magical mask prevented her from recognizing his face, the tunnel's existence was a clear giveaway that only the master blacksmith could have known. Terrified, Lager accidentally revealed himself, triggering Louis's rage. A golden aura erupted around her as she accused him of fleeing just to avoid forging her weapon, eventually declaring that he would serve her for the rest of his life. Before she could strike the trembling dwarf, a violent explosion of force detonated between them. Louis was hurled backward, though she regained her footing effortlessly. As the dust settled, Berge stepped forward calmly and ordered Lager to retrieve his equipment immediately. Unable to identify the intruder due to the magical interference, the princess demanded to know who he was. Berge simply introduced himself as the master of the blacksmith she had been mistreating. Infuriated, Louis launched herself into the air, and their fists collided with enough speed and power to send shockwaves through the room. The brutal exchange looked less like a fight between mortals and more like a clash between monsters, ending with Louis catching one of Berge's strikes and countering with a blow that sent him crashing into the ceiling. Berge reappeared instantly, slamming Louise into the ground as she tried to reach Lager. The confrontation escalated with terrifying speed, and Berge immediately recognized his opponent as the second daughter of Princess Weft. Even in her youth, Louise possessed extraordinary power. Berger knew that allowing her to mature would create an unstoppable threat. While the logical choice was to eliminate her now, doing so would force him to reveal his full demonic strength prematurely. As the fight intensified, Lager worked frantically to dismantle a massive mana phantom machine designed to erase and conceal energy traces. Berger pressured the blacksmith relentlessly, warning that he had only 1 minute to complete the task if he wanted to survive. Despite Louise's power surging even higher, Berger carefully calculated how long he could hold her back without exposing his true identity. The moment Lager shouted that the machine was free, Berger delivered a devastating kick to the princess's chest, pinning her down in a massive explosion. He quickly opened his subspace pocket and ordered Lager to retreat. By the time Louise rose from the dust and realized her soldiers had finally arrived, Berger, the blacksmith, and the apparatus had already vanished. Though she ordered an immediate pursuit, she stopped upon realizing every tunnel had collapsed. Lager had never intended to return. Back within the first floor of the tower, Berger stood before the colossal magical device. Princess Hernan watched in disbelief while Lager, now a devoted subordinate, finished examining the reinforced framework. Upon Berger's command, the device roared to life, fueled by a surge of his demonic energy. A translucent system interface appeared, and Berger authorized the synchronization immediately. The process was seamless. The Mana Phantom acknowledged Berger as its master, and its power source was fully converted from mana to pure demonic energy. Turning toward the dwarf, Berger saw Lager reacting with barely restrained excitement. The blacksmith fervently denied any interference, yet he was clearly overwhelmed by the result. The successful fusion of the machine with the tower and the total energy conversion surpassed anything previously thought possible. Lager recognized this as a breakthrough far beyond the original creator's vision, and even Princess Hernan stepped closer, her eyes gleaming as she observed the newly awakened structure. Berger casually suggested that Hernan test her own power, and delighted by the chance, she immediately began preparing a spell. As complex symbols materialized, a massive sphere of multicolored magic condensed in the air. Lager panicked instantly. The thought of such overwhelming energy being released right after he had finished cleaning nearly moved him to tears. However, his frantic pleas were ignored as Berger remained focused on the phenomenon. A spell of that magnitude should have been detectable far beyond the tower, yet when Berger stepped outside to check, he found no visual disturbances or fluctuations in perception. The magic did not leak at all, proving that a tower synchronized with a monophone could perfectly conceal its internal activity. Intrigued, Berger extended his demonic energy to manipulate the structure itself. With a single gesture, the entire tower vanished from existence, only to reappear exactly as before moments later. He realized with quiet intensity that he could now summon or hide the fortress at will. Although mastering this control would take time, Berger understood its immense strategic value, and a restrained smile formed as demonic light flickered in his eyes. In the inner chamber, Lager finally lost all composure. Bursting with excitement, he begged for permission to study the device, nearly asking to dismantle both the apparatus and the tower itself before hastily correcting his words. His behavior bordered on obsession as he declared the discovery unprecedented in history. After studying him carefully, Berger granted permission on one condition. If Lager annihilated the heroes trapped on the first floor, he could do as he pleased afterward. Crimson energy immediately surged around the dwarf as he began chanting, fully immersing himself in what he now viewed as sacred research. Berger then turned to Princess Hernan, calmly proposing that she confront the heroes who had reached the fourth floor. Although she hesitated, her protest was playful. Berger reminded her that she was a gifted spirit with no intention of returning to her old royal life. Even so, he recognized the gravity of his request. She was still an innocent princess unfamiliar with the world's cruelty, and asking her to oppose her own kind was a heavy burden. As uncertainty flickered through Hernan's thoughts while she considered which powers to use, Berger stopped her before she could reach a decision. Combat was deemed unnecessary. Instead, Berger explained that Hernan simply needed to disrupt the heroes and declare herself their enemy. He promised another wish as a reward for her success. After a brief silence, she nodded in agreement, requesting on one condition that she be introduced as his subordinate rather than a princess. Berger accepted immediately, and a look of unmistakable joy lit up her face as she struggled to contain her excitement. Despite her enthusiasm, he strictly instructed her to follow his orders to the letter. Later, Berge sat in quiet contemplation while studying the floating system interface. His strategy was clear. The first floor's monarch cannons would thin the enemy ranks, while Ernan would act as bait on the fourth floor to lure in the remaining survivors for elimination. However, he realized this was insufficient. With over 200 heroes advancing, the plan wouldn't even wipe out half of them. The only remaining path to victory was to increase his own power, and his gaze fell upon a shimmering treasure in his hand that radiated dense demonic energy. Elsewhere, amidst the biting cold of an endless snowy landscape, the princess's previous successes began to feel more like luck than skill after several failed attempts. Suddenly, a massive figure appeared, prompting Berge to instantly gather dark energy in his arm. The interruption clearly irritated him. The giant bowed deeply, identifying himself as Crew 2 of the Blue Forest tribe and explaining that his people sought the Demon King's protection. The entire tribe knelt, confessing that their ancestors were demons who had once betrayed the realm and that they now sought redemption through service. Berge watched them coldly, recognizing that their true motive was a thirst for power. He noted that their connection to demonic energy was far stronger than their reliance on spirit blossoms. When a sealed box was opened to reveal a frost-encased grim lotus, Berge understood why the item had been so elusive. He acknowledged the tribe's surprising ability to negotiate, a rare trait for a group known only for brute strength. After considering the offer, Berge accepted, embedding a demonic sigil into Crew 2. As the giant's form twisted and transformed into a true demon, he and the rest of the tribe knelt in absolute submission. Meanwhile, back at the Ergius mountain tower, power surged through the walls as an orc legion assembled in disciplined ranks outside. On the ground floor, Lager stood prepared alongside 60 monarch cannons, while Berge performed a final sweep of the battlefield. With the tower secured, every piece of his strategy was positioned exactly as intended, and Princess Ernan waited for her cue on the fourth floor. As he focused on the approaching enemy, Berge's dark eyes hardened. He was determined to avenge the humiliations he had suffered in his previous life. Meanwhile, the heroes stared up at the daunting peak of Ergius Mountain, which loomed over them like a silent challenge. Their preparation base sat behind them, a magnificent city where many legends were born. Inside the grand central hall, a lavish banquet filled with light and music celebrated the warriors on the eve of their final march. Beneath the towering ceilings, nobles, knights, mages, and merchants gathered to drink and share in the anticipation of victory. Among the crowd, a young hero in polished armor stood with the elderly Lord Castellan, who praised the young man for remaining humble despite his great achievements. The hero expressed his gratitude for the host's generosity and the feast held in their honor. Proud to witness a journey he believed would be etched into history, the Lord eventually pressured the uncomfortable hero, Lord Hylan, to address the assembly to boost morale. Reluctantly agreeing, since there was no graceful way to refuse, Hylan stepped forward as the room fell silent. He gathered his composure and addressed everyone present, from the high-ranking nobles to the mercenaries. He declared that their long expedition had finally reached its turning point. With unwavering confidence, Hylan claimed that their march for justice had terrified the Demon King so much that not a single monster had dared to block their path. Laughter erupted as the crowd's confidence surged, though Hylan quickly warned them to stay alert. He assured the audience that every possible preparation had been made and proclaimed that the following day would bring the end of the foolish Demon King. Raising his glass with righteous fervor, he invoked the kidnapping of Princess Ernan of the Hildurin Kingdom, declaring it was time for the world to remember who truly held the power. The fiery declaration concluded the speech, and the hall immediately erupted into thunderous cheers. From a distance, Granada the elf watched the scene with a calm, analytical eye. He noted that the expedition's size remained exactly as the Demon King had predicted, neither growing nor shrinking. Reflecting on Hylan's words, Granada recognized that the man's charisma was the engine driving their success, as he had managed to secure guild funding and maintain the loyalty of even the most unreliable mercenaries. Yet a sense of unease lingered. The memory of the last empty tower he had scouted made him doubt that the final battle would be as simple as everyone expected. For a moment, a treacherous thought of betraying the heroes surfaced, but Granada quickly panicked and dismissed it, reminding himself that defeating the Demon King was his only way to break his curse. To clear his head, Granada stepped out for some fresh air and prepared to send a report. Later that night, under the full moon, he stood on a high balcony with a glowing device in hand. From the other side, Berger's voice came through with cold authority, confirming his arrival at Horton Walk and announcing that the climb would start the next day. The Demon King issued a final, cryptic warning. Granada had to be careful of the snow, stay alert at night, and, most importantly, never be near the tower door when it opened. The connection cut off abruptly, leaving the elf frozen and weighed down by confusion. Suddenly, a presence appeared behind him. Startled, Granada turned to see a relaxed Hylan observing him. Noticing the elf's tension, Hylan offered him a glass of elven fruit wine, and as Granada drank, his nerves finally began to settle. Hylan casually asked if the elf truly believed they could defeat the Demon King, his tone light but the question serious. As Granada hesitated to answer, he noticed Hylan staring into his own cup, his cheerful mask fading into a moment of quiet honesty. The hero admitted his own uncertainty, catching Granada off guard by confessing that despite the trust people placed in him, attacking a Demon King's tower was always a descent into hell. Victory had never been a simple matter. Seeking to offer some comfort, Granada brought up Hylan's past triumph over the Demon King of Lust, suggesting that a newcomer to the throne shouldn't pose as much of a threat. However, as he spoke, an unsettling realization hit the elf. Very few details actually existed regarding how Hylan had achieved that specific kill. When Granada curiously pressed for more information about the fight, Hylan dodged the topic entirely. His face shifted back into a heroic mask as he instead credited the brave comrades who had fought at the front lines. Placing a firm, trusting hand on Granada's shoulder, Hylan reaffirmed his faith in the elf and declared that he would lead the charge, asking Granada to protect his flank. Granada nodded in agreement, and a satisfied Hylan guided him back toward the celebration. Side by side they walked, though Hylan's unreadable expression hid the true, darker nature of their alliance. That night, alone with his thoughts, Hylan's heroic persona vanished, replaced by a cynical smirk as he glanced at a ring set with a red gemstone. Beneath the surface, his true intentions remained cold as he silently placed his expectations on Granada once more. By the next morning, the base was buzzing with life. As the massive expedition finally marched out, citizens lined the streets with loud cheers and words of encouragement, specifically praising the leadership of Granada and Wharton. While Granada marched with a calm, forward-looking focus, Hylan walked proudly beside him, soaking up the crowd's admiration until the city noise faded into the silence of the mountains. The journey soon led the force into the harsh, snowy canyons of the Erghaus Range, where biting winds and desolate cliffs became their constant companions. As they wound through the landscape, the earlier tension began to lift, and casual conversations took over. Some noted that the weather was surprisingly mild, while others joked that reaching the tower would be a breeze at this pace. Laughter spread as warriors teased that the rumored disaster-class monsters were likely too terrified of Hylan to show their faces. This confidence was shattered instantly when a warrior felt a tap on his shoulder. Pulling his hand away, he found it coated in sticky purple slime. Horror replaced confusion the moment he turned to see a massive ghoul looming over him. As screams erupted throughout the canyon and more creatures swarmed from every side, Hylan's presence sliced through the panic as he raised his sword, his resolve appearing unshaken. The expedition was immediately placed on high alert as orders were issued to transform the narrow canyon into a defensive line. In the ensuing chaos, magic illuminated the frozen ground while knights shielded their mages, clashing steel against undead flesh. The situation escalated when a colossal frost giant, a skeletal being made entirely of ice, burst from the canyon wall. Sensing the danger, Hylan commanded a full retreat and declared he would take on the monster alone. As the others fled, Hylan charged the beast with a surge of blue energy. Although the creature initially seemed unmoved, Hylan pressed his assault, meeting a downward swing from the giant with a powerful upward slash that shattered its icy limb. With relentless force, he systematically destroyed the monster's remaining arm and carved through its massive frame. Seizing the right moment, he unleashed a final flurry of devastating strikes, signaling for the rest of the heroes to escape. They surged past him just as the enraged giant denied its prey, triggered a massive self-destructing explosion that shook the entire canyon. Exhausted and in shock, the survivors stumbled into a nearby snowy forest. While the mood was grim, many celebrated Hylan's overwhelming strength, noting that casualties remained surprisingly low. Rumors began to circulate that Hylan had absorbed the power of the Demon King of Lust, making him an equal to their current foe. This boosted the group's confidence, though Granada remained silent, privately doubting if even Highland could truly win. This flicker of hope vanished when a new threat appeared, a tribe of massive blue-skinned orcs led by a horned chieftain. Granada instantly recognized them as beings infused with demonic energy, loyal servants of the Demon King. As the chieftain stepped forward, a deep rumble began to shake the mountainside. Suddenly, Berger's cryptic warning about the snow flashed through Granada's mind. Terror filled his face as the ice groaned, and massive cracks spread across the slopes. The roar of an impending avalanche drowned out all other sounds, and panic consumed Granada just as the disaster struck. A massive avalanche swept down the mountain, instantly burying the entire expedition under a weight of snow and ice. Warriors, mages, and heroes were swallowed by the frozen chaos, and Granada's final cry was quickly silenced. Far away in his fortress, Demon King Berger watched the catastrophe unfold on holographic screens. As the images of the heroes vanished one by one, a cold, satisfied smirk crossed his face. He leaned back, certain that his plan had succeeded, and that this time, no one would escape. Berger remained perfectly composed on his throne, his voice devoid of emotion as he reflected on the trap he had set long before the heroes sensed any danger. As the blizzard intensified and became suffocating, traditional damage reports became useless in the face of such total destruction. Amidst the roaring winds, Berger had already issued commands that forced the survivors to struggle through the freezing gusts, just to set up a temporary camp and search for their scattered companions. The Demon King continued his detached explanation as the situation turned even grimmer with the arrival of night. Ghoul-type monsters emerged from the deepest shadows, blending into the snow, followed by massive forest beasts that made the frozen ground tremble. When the heroes realized that orc reinforcements had also appeared, they immediately drew their weapons and tightened their formation for yet another battle. Watching from a distance, Granada ground his teeth in frustration. The violence was escalating far beyond the limits of calculated warfare. Finally, the Demon King himself moved forward with a grim smile. The cycle was relentless, avalanches by day and monster attacks by night. Long before the heroes could grasp the true nature of this trap, exhaustion would begin to destroy their bodies and minds. For Berger, their eventual collapse was no longer just a possibility, it was inevitable. After 3 days of this never-ending nightmare, a constant struggle between life and death, the toll on the heroes was undeniable as they finally reached the highest summit of the Urgis Mountains. Heavy breathing and sluggish movements signaled that the heroes' strength was almost entirely gone. One night, a wave of disbelief froze the group as someone pointed out that the Demon King's tower was nowhere to be found. Berger spoke up, his voice sharp with confusion as he insisted a tower should be standing at the very peak. However, a commander stepped in to halt him, resolutely declaring the mission a failure. He argued that survival now had to come before victory, as continuing would only result in pointless deaths. Berger could only stare in silence, shock and frustration written all over his face. It took 6 days in the Urgis Mountains before the fortress finally appeared, reigniting the heroes' fury. As the gates were forced open, their confidence surged. One knight even laughed, dismissing the first floor as a nest of weaklings and urging a reckless advance. That was the moment the Demon King's voice echoed coldly from every direction. With a suffocating presence and a chilling smile, he welcomed those who entered into a living hell. Massive magical cannons materialized, encircling the warriors while violent lightning tore through the air with a deafening roar. Any remaining hope Berger had vanished instantly as the true scale of the trap was revealed. From his control room, the Demon King watched the opening strike with calm detachment. Below, Berger struggled to stay upright, his grip tightening on his sword as he fought for breath. Nothing about this encounter followed the logic or strategy of his past experiences, leaving him consumed by rage and confusion. Granada soon emerged through the drifting smoke, shaken but miraculously unharmed after narrowly dodging the cannon fire. Briefly relieved, Berger insisted they push toward the next floor immediately. Granada hesitated, clearly wary of the undeniable danger, but Berger firmly reminded him of his past triumph over the Demon King of Lust and the great power he had gained from that battle. Convinced that this current foe was manageable compared to previous ordeals, the pair believed that as long as they fought together, victory remained within reach. After a brief silence, Granada agreed, and they advanced into the tower side by side. However, the second and third floors were eerily vacant, causing a slow anger to boil beneath Berger's skin. This lack of resistance felt deeply unnatural. A fortress of this magnitude should have been swarming with monsters, yet they found no movement, no hostility, and not even a trace of lingering mana. While Hylan vented his frustration, Granada stayed quiet, sensing that a powerful hand was deliberately rearranging the battlefield. His thoughts instinctively turned toward Princess Hernan. Despite the emptiness, Berger refused to let his guard down, warning that a trap could be triggered at any second as he moved forward with measured, cautious steps. Their progress halted abruptly on the 4th floor, where they were met not by a battlefield, but by a vibrant, lush forest that looked like a tranquil garden. Breathing slowly, Granada identified the scenery as a spatial distortion created through high-level magic. Hylan began to doubt if they were even inside the tower anymore, but his thoughts were cut short when he spotted a delicate yet unsettling young woman standing ahead in demonic attire. Radiating dark mana, she playfully introduced herself as the Dark Spirit Master, one of the 4 heavenly kings serving the Demon King. A heavy silence fell over the woods as the truth began to sink in. Though Hylan had endured hell to rescue a princess, she now stood before him as a formidable enemy. Hernan rejected her former royal title, confirming her identity as the Dark Spirit Master before effortlessly summoning a pinnacle spirit art that only she could perform with such perfection. In that instant, every piece of the puzzle clicked into place. The nighttime ambushes, the hidden tower, the cannons, and the empty floors were all part of a grand strategy centered around her. As the warmth drained from his face, Berger let out a hollow, bitter laugh, his disbelief turning into violent rage at the realization that the woman he came to save had been protecting the Demon King all along. Space itself began to tremble before he could make a move. Dark purple energy suddenly erupted throughout the garden, shattering the ground as the Demon King finally manifested, his overwhelming presence warping the very air. As his freezing gaze locked onto Hylan, a deep resentment ignited within the hero. Realizing he was completely cornered, Hylan understood that his current power was insufficient and that he required something more. Turning sharply, Hylan demanded Granada's strength. While the Demon King watched the ground shake, Hylan stepped closer, insisting they merge their powers. Granada hesitated, his face a mask of confusion as he struggled to understand how such a fusion was possible, but his body suddenly stiffened. Panic surged through him as he felt his life force draining away. With every heartbeat, his vitality bled into Hylan. With a cold, detached expression, Hylan calmly reassured the dying elf that everything would be fine as long as he stayed by his side. As Granada collapsed, the Demon King immediately recognized the truth behind Hylan's new strength. The hero had revealed a forbidden relic known as the Elf Eater, an artifact designed to kill its victim by converting their boundless life force into pure mana. Hylan pressed his boot into Granada's face, justifying the murder as a necessary sacrifice for the greater good. The Demon King watched this disgraceful, unmistakably human display, and smiled, noting that removing the ring would instantly erase all that borrowed power. Hylan broke into manic laughter, boasting that even the Demon King of Lust had failed to take the ring from him. In response, the Demon King uttered a single name, Gordon. A split second later, shock twisted Hylan's face as searing pain tore through his chest and blood sprayed into the air. He had sensed no warning, no mana fluctuation or presence at all. As his hand went limp and his strength vanished, Hylan realized Gordon was standing behind him. The Demon King's loyal servant held his lowered blade with total indifference, as if the lethal strike had been nothing more than a minor chore. Before Hylan could even attempt to recover, Gordon struck again, sending him crashing violently across the ground. Lying there in disbelief, the hero finally grasped the true scale of the threat. Gordon was a high-ranking demon whose power completely overwhelmed him, even with the artifact's energy. Suddenly, a crushing pressure descended as the Demon King appeared behind Hylan, gripping his shoulder with effortless strength. With crimson light burning in his eyes and a faint, amused laugh, he made it clear that escape was impossible. Hylan tried to move, but his body refused to obey as space itself transformed into a cage. A massive, wolf-shaped presence, an ancient ruler that once dominated the continent, loomed over him, and Hylan realized there was nowhere left to run. Dark energy swirled violently, cracking the ground as the Demon King calmly declared it was time to reveal the true nature of his power. As oppressive energy spread across the battlefield, Hylan remained sprawled on the ground, half dead, but miraculously still breathing. Berger acknowledged that surviving such a brutal assault was a remarkable feat. yet he coldly ordered Gordon to bind the hero's hands and throw him into the dungeon. He further instructed that the other humans who had collapsed outside also be locked away. Gordon immediately moved to carry out these commands without hesitation. Meanwhile, Granada was in a state of agony. His body looked like a white skeleton, and he groaned that he could already see the afterlife. After mockingly praising the elf's efforts, Berger used a spirit blossom on him, instantly healing his wounds. Granada stood frozen, stunned by the sudden recovery, while Berger applied the same magic to the princess. Watching this, the elf quietly wondered if the Demon King had used the exact same method to save him. Soon after, the dwarf cried out in excitement as Berger granted him permission to dismantle the tower as a reward for his hard work. Overwhelmed with joy, the blacksmith celebrated loudly and expressed his boundless gratitude. With the conflict settled, Berger instructed everyone to return to their assigned floors to begin the necessary maintenance and restoration. Once his final orders were given, Berger departed the area. As the chaos subsided, Granada reflected on the battle, noting that the Demon King appeared completely untouched despite the intensity of the fight, a fact that only solidified his terrifying reputation. The princess, however, seemed preoccupied. When Granada questioned her, she dismissed his concern as nothing, though she quietly mentioned that the Demon King looked exhausted. In reality, once he was away from prying eyes, Berger collapsed onto the floor in total exhaustion. Clenching his teeth, he admitted to himself how narrow his victory had been. Even if a leader of his status could never let such weakness show. He cursed Hyland's name, recognizing the true danger of facing one of the continent's 10 strongest heroes. Even though Hyland was considered one of the weaker members of that elite group, Berger knew that his own lack of resources in this life meant he had barely strengthened himself. He was certain that if the hero had been at full strength, winning would have been impossible. Instead, his strategy had worked by slowly wearing Hyland down, provoking him until panic clouded his judgment and exposed a fatal opening. This mistake allowed Berger's final strike to connect, securing what he considered a perfect victory. More importantly, he realized he had successfully altered fate, fueling his resolve to change the future and finally get revenge on those who had once destroyed him. Meanwhile, the Holton Walk press conference hall was in total disarray. Arguments broke out as reporters mocked officials, refusing to believe the claim that the heroes had simply given up because they couldn't locate the tower. Furious investors demanded to know who would be held accountable for the mission's failure. Amidst the shouting, one man tried to maintain hope, insisting that Sir Hyland and the other heroes were still searching and merely needed more time. This only caused the king to explode in a fit of rage. He cursed Hyland for his arrogance, fuming that the hero had made bold promises but delivered no results. He declared that if his daughter was not rescued, Hyland would face execution without mercy. The princess, fueled by frustration, tried to explain the hero's journey, but the king silenced her before she could speak. Showing no interest in her excuses, he commanded that the blacksmith be located immediately. Meanwhile, rumors began to circulate rapidly. Some whispered that Sir Hyland had never come back, while others were convinced he was already dead. As these exaggerated stories about the new Demon King spread across the continent, the world fell into a state of deep mourning. This widespread despair caused the tower's demonic energy to accumulate at an incredible speed. At the Heroes Guild headquarters, a tense meeting was underway as members interrogated Wharton about the accuracy of his report. Wharton swore on his honor that he was telling the truth, but an elder hero noted the gravity of the situation. He insisted on caution since the Demon King's identity remained a mystery, reminding the group that someone as powerful as Hyland, one of the 10 stars, would not be defeated easily. They ultimately decided to wait 10 days for news. If nothing changed, a massive force of 4,128 heroes from across the land would launch an all-out assault. The scene then shifted to the dungeons of the tower, where Hyland was being held captive. Upon his arrival, Berger noticed the hero was already awake and remarked on his impressively fast recovery. Hyland bluntly stated that if he were still alive, Berger must want something, so he demanded the Demon King get to the point. Amused by this directness, Berger smirked and offered Hyland a position as his vassal. As Hyland sat there stunned, Berger placed a heavy bag of gold coins before him. He pointed out the staggering costs of a hero's journey, including food for hundreds, gear, and membership fees. Expenses usually covered by nobles and merchants. Berger explained that while defeating a Demon King brings fame, failure leaves a hero buried under life-altering debt. Since all the investments had been placed specifically on Hylan, the hero silently realized the truth. Even if he escaped, he would be branded a failure and spent the rest of his life hiding from creditors. When Hylan questioned how he possessed such specific knowledge, Granada stepped forward to admit he was the source of the information. Enraged, Hylan accused the elf of betrayal, but Granada fiercely countered by labeling Hylan a fraud and reminding him of his past mistreatment. He then declared his loyalty to Berger had been established from the very start. Berger calmly explained the true cause of Hylan's downfall, noting that a demon king of his caliber was unprecedented. Despite his unease at Berger's confidence, Hylan watched as the demon king laughed and revealed Armani's orb. Berger explained that this magical tool, once ingested, would attach itself to a subject's brain to monitor their thoughts. This would allow Berger to immediately detect any lingering hostility from Hylan. Nearby, the rest of Hylan's companions lay scattered and groaning in agony. Desperate, Hylan argued that a hero of his strength was immune to mind control, believing the orb would simply vanish upon entering his body. However, Granada grinned and explained that a hero's mental defenses could be voluntarily dispelled. With a mocking smirk, Berger made it clear that Hylan's own arrogance had sealed his fate. Although Hylan hurled insults and swore he would never submit to a monster, Berger ignored the resistance and forced him to swallow the device. As agonizing pain tore through the hero's body, Granada remarked on his tenacity, but wondered if Hylan might choose death instead. Berger showed no concern, reasoning that a greedy man who treated his comrades like disposable tools for profit would never sacrifice his own life. A system interface soon appeared, identifying Hylan Cargill and officially marking his status as the Demon King's vassal. As Hylan cursed his new reality, the scene shifted back to the castle where Gordon addressed Berger. He noted that even with Hylan as a subordinate, his actions were limited by a massive debt of 100,000 gold. Gordon pointed out that their previous exchange had yielded only 2,000 gold, a sum nearly equal to a small nation's annual budget, and questioned how they would ever gather the remaining fortune. With a confident smirk, Berger remarked that it was finally time for a message to arrive. When Gordon appeared confused, Berger explained that he was referring to the Unison of Towers, an annual assembly of demon kings. Reflecting on his past life, Berger recalled how he had previously skipped these meetings out of disgust for the idea of demon kings cooperating. Now, however, he reasoned that those who had survived in Arian for so long must have amassed incredible hoons of gold and treasure. Gordon was initially shocked, suspecting that Berger planned to trade more demonic energy points for cash. In the past, he would have protested, but after facing the heroes directly, Gordon understood that traditional methods were no longer sufficient. Realizing that following old standards would have led to their defeat, he chose to place his full trust in his leader. When news of the formal invitation arrived, Berger greeted it with a sly smile, declaring their intention to attend and swindle the senior demon kings. Gordon pledged his total obedience to the plan. The scene then moved to the 13th floor of the Tower of Lies. Entering with a faint grin, Berger hoped aloud that he wasn't late, noting that the others had gathered early as if they had much to discuss without him. He was welcomed by Draxen Doldove, the Beast King, while Reyna Salden, a frost demon, remarked that Berger was currently the main topic of conversation. Uyghur Belvek, a titan known as the Demon King of Indestructibility, mentioned that the fool who had insulted Jason Kochman had already been removed. Jason, the Devil of Lies, also offered a cheerful welcome. Internally labeling them all as pathetic, Berger smiled and questioned whether a demon king should feel ashamed of such harmony. Though he knew this was the necessary path for Aryan, he remained skeptical. When Belvek exploded in a rage, demanding what a newcomer could possibly understand about their world, Berger calmly noted how easy it was to read people just by scratching the surface. Sensing Belvek's murderous intent, Berger mockingly called him an idiot for thinking he was in charge. As the Titan threatened to kill him, Berger casually challenged him to try. As the two demon kings locked eyes, Jason stepped in, reminding Belvek that the purpose of their gathering was harmony and urging him not to spoil it. Berger noticed that the murderous intent from both sides vanished instantly. He wondered if this was due to Jason's personal influence or the inherent power of the tower itself, eventually deciding to cooperate. Jason thanked him, while Berger privately compared the phenomenon to a mana ghost before dismissing the thought as mere speculation and reminding himself to stay alert. Jason then officially opened the meeting, announcing that everyone was free to speak. Berge, however, remarked that the start was not particularly impressive. Draxen then turned his anger toward Belvec, demanding to know Highland Cargill's current whereabouts. Berge fell silent for a moment before preparing to explain the hero's status. Meanwhile, the scene shifted to the adjutant's reception room, where Gordon sat under the cold stares of the aides serving the Beast King and the Devil of Lies. When they pressed him to reveal if Hylan was dead, a visibly nervous Gordon claimed ignorance, explaining that the hero hadn't even reached the summit. He suggested that Hylan might still be wandering Mount Urgaus and begged them to stop the interrogation. One of the beastmen scoffed, arguing that the tower should be visible if Hylan were truly nearby, but Gordon simply replied that it wasn't their specific tower to find. Another aide wondered aloud if the rumors about the Demon King were true. Inside his head, Gordon realized that everything was unfolding exactly as Berge had predicted. He recalled his master's strict instructions to act like a spy and maintain total confidentiality if questioned about Hylan. Despite feeling that the situation was bizarre, Gordon realized the Demon King's strategy was working. Suddenly, he burst into a shout, calling the master he served a rebel and a fool who refused to listen to anyone. He complained loudly that if left alone for a second, his leader would do something crazy, angrily declaring that he would rather everything be done without him. Unexpectedly, this outburst provided Hylan, who was listening, with a refreshing sense of relief. Hearing the rant, the other beastmen offered their sympathy, complaining that all demon lords were difficult and sharing similar frustrations about their own masters. As Hylan listened to their shared grievances, tears began to stream down his face. In his heart, Gordon realized that he had truly needed that small moment of comfort. Meanwhile, the scene transitioned back to the Tower of Lies, where Belvec stared at Berge in disbelief. He questioned whether Berge honestly expected him to accept the current situation, to which Berge calmly affirmed that he did. This sparked an angry outburst from Belvec, who pointed out that Hyland Cargill had not yet arrived. He accused Berge of failing to even build his tower at the mountain's peak, and reaching the limit of his frustration, demanded to know who Berge thought he was fooling since the tower was only 82% complete. Jason joined the conversation, noting that the situation remained unchanged as warriors continued to target the fortress. He mockingly questioned why Berge had abandoned his own tower to attend the meeting, sarcastically referring to him as a towerless leader, and ironically calling him the best graduate from the Demon King Academy. Berge dismissed these concerns, stating there was no reason to worry because he would personally ensure his tower's safety. Privately, however, Berge admitted that the Devil of Lies had been bothering him for some time. When Jason tried to continue his mockery, Berge cut him off, signaling that no further commentary was needed. An irritated Draxen then asked if Berge truly believed Grand Duke Arcane would ignore the matter, but Berge flatly replied that the old woman's opinion was irrelevant. While Draxen silently noted Berge's extreme stubbornness, Berge reflected that a direct confrontation would reveal nothing. For now, his doubts were settled, and he decided it was better to avoid trouble than to get caught. He reminded himself that his top priority remained collecting 100,000 gold. As the discussion among the demon lords proceeded, Berge participated more actively than anyone expected. He observed a clear hierarchy among them, with the Demon King of Lies firmly at the top. While gathering information on which leaders were most desperate for magic points, Berge was momentarily confused when Reyna cast a cold gaze in his direction. The scene eventually shifted to the 13th floor balcony of the Tower of Lies, where Reyna stood alone. Berge approached her and asked what was happening. Reyna clarified that her intentions were not meant to be secretive. Rather, she had simply wished for a private conversation after hearing the recent rumors. Although surprised that she wanted to speak with him specifically, Deus listened as she confirmed her interest directly. She explained that she actually agreed with some of his perspectives, a revelation that left Deus stunned as he wondered if she had ever expressed such thoughts in his previous life. To ensure there was no misunderstanding, Reyna pointed out that she still valued traditional principles and did not share his disdain for orthodoxy. However, she believed that Aaron sometimes required flexibility, which is why she found him easier to communicate with than the others. After Deus shared his own thoughts, Reyna admitted he was more impressive than she had first imagined. She then handed him a personal communication device, offering her advice whenever he might need it. Her only condition for their continued acquaintance was that he refrain from insulting the Demon King's standards in her presence. Before leaving the balcony, she expressed her hope that someone as capable as him would remain around. When Deus questioned why she didn't just talk to the Devil of Lies, she explained that he was too difficult to read. Though Deus remained cautious and didn't fully trust her, He recognized that meeting Reina was an unexpected and valuable advantage. Meanwhile, the scene shifted to the first floor of Burgess Tower. The princess arrived to visit Lager, bringing a batch of cookies she had baked herself using ingredients purchased by the Demon King. She cheerfully urged him to try them, explaining that she had used the help of spirits to complete the task. Lager, surprised to find snacks in such a place, praised her as a brilliant spiritist and noted how unusually comfortable the atmosphere had become. As he prepared to taste the treats, Lager privately recalled that the princess had been raised in luxury, never having to perform any manual labor. He assumed the cookies would likely be poor, but he resolved to politely compliment them anyway to be kind. However, the moment he took a first bite, his low expectations were instantly shattered. The incredible flavor of the cookies overwhelmed Lager, leaving him visibly shaken as he realized he had never tasted anything so heavenly. Watching him closely, the princess asked for his opinion. Lager remained stunned by her creation, while she shyly explained that a small amount of sesame oil had been mixed into the dough. As he struggled to understand why the treat felt so precious, he felt his energy dip before surging back with new strength. The princess smiled, describing the snack as a gift to build their future friendship, and playfully suggested sharing some with Granada. Lager laughed, noting that the shock would be even greater for the elf, while the princess excitedly wondered if the Demon King would also enjoy them. The scene then shifted to Berrier, who returned to the meeting hall after his private talk with Reina, only to find it deserted. Jason confirmed that the gathering had already concluded, prompting Berger to remark on how quickly it had ended. Sensing his frustration, Jason offered him tea and suggested he might be feeling some regret, which Berger firmly denied. However, Jason maintained his composure and pointed out that Berger was in desperate need of something essential: money. Berger was visibly shocked, wondering how Jason could possibly know his private business. Jason told him that pretending was useless since Draxen had already revealed everything. Rather than wasting time on psychological games, Jason immediately proposed a deal to exchange demonic energy points for human currency. Though Berger remained cautious about Jason's true motives, the Devil of Lies chuckled and expressed his desire for a strong, cooperative relationship between their towers. The agreement was quickly finalized, and the scene moved to the first floor of Burgess Tower, where massive sacks of gold sent by Jason were revealed. Berger wasted no time, ordering that 100,000 gold pieces be moved immediately. Shocked by the sight, Hyland stood frozen as he realized Jason had actually kept his word. However, Berger remained cautious, analyzing the situation and suspecting that Jason might have the power to track the flow of these funds. His greatest fear was being reduced to a mere puppet in the other's hands. Addressing those present, Berger explained that every survivor had already been transformed into dark knights and dark magicians. He specifically pointed out a man named Emin from the Golden Moon Merchant Guild, revealing that he had known about Emin's background since the initial contract was made. Hyland listened in silence as Berger placed the dark knights and magicians of Burgess Tower in charge of the gold, emphasizing that their loyalty to his commands was absolute. Meanwhile, those who had been forced into these binding contracts harbored deep resentment, silently hoping Hyland might somehow rescue them. Berger then remarked that the situation wasn't a total loss since they were still alive and their debts could be settled, implying a potential return to their heroic roles in the future. When Hyland smirked and suggested they should work together as partners, Berger's expression immediately soured. In an instant, Berger activated the orb in his hand, triggering the device embedded in Hyland's brain. As a wave of excruciating pain forced the hero to the ground, Berger coldly corrected him, stating that their relationship was one of master and slave rather than a partnership. The watching dark knights and magicians felt a grim satisfaction, believing Hyland deserved the agony. Still trembling, Hyland weakly tried to mask his suffering by joking that he hadn't realized Berger enjoyed such cruel games. Ignoring the remark, Berger emotionlessly ordered everyone to disperse and begin their duties. As the scene continued, the princess approached Hyland and handed him a letter intended for her sister. Hyland realized she meant Elena, the 13th princess of Hilderin, and accepted the mission. Later, Gordon expressed his concerns to Berger. He clarified that while he didn't distrust the Demon King, he doubted the hero's willingness to follow orders. Berger responded by explaining that Hyland Cargill was more complex than a simple materialist driven only by money. Berger pointed out that while it might not be obvious, Hyland lacked the typical, vulgar greed of humans who only chase wealth. However, he also admitted the hero wasn't particularly noble. Instead, Hyland's primary motivation was popularity rather than honor. By observing Hyland's aggressive behavior, Berge concluded that his actions were always driven by a desire to stand out. He believed that if Hyland were properly controlled through the Armani orb, he would become an incomparable spy. Gordon, reflecting in silence, was impressed by how deeply his master had studied human nature and felt he could no longer remain idle. With a smirk, Berge imagined the spectacle of a hero acting as his subordinate to dismantle human society from within. Gordon immediately affirmed his loyalty to this vision. A sudden knock at the door interrupted them, and the princess entered carrying a plate of cookies, which she offered in a casual manner. Taking the plate, Berge noted that she had been wandering in and out of the hall far too freely lately, warning her that he would lock her in the dungeon for a month if she continued to annoy him. Unfazed, she insisted he try the cookies first. Berge dismissed them as a simple human dessert, but his expression shifted the moment he took a bite. Clearly shocked by the unfamiliar and intense flavor, Berge's reaction was closely watched by the princess, who wondered if he would enjoy them as others had. Despite the faint sweat on his face, Berge smirked and admitted the snack was decent for a human creation. Internally, the princess was stunned that he had withstood the taste. Berge then pointed out that she had mixed medicinal herbs into the dough, creating a dangerous flavor profile. She openly admitted she knew he would notice, leading Berge to realize she was seeking a specific reward in exchange for her efforts. The princess chuckled in confirmation, leaving Berge visibly confused as the story moved forward. Later, after reaching Molten Walk, the group used a teleport circle to depart for Hildoran, where Granada quickly restored order. The scene transitioned to the Scarlet Hawk mercenaries' headquarters, where Granada's subordinates had returned battered and bruised. Burning with rage, Granada interrogated them, demanding to know how they could have abandoned their captain and fled during the very first avalanche without even attempting to face the danger. One mercenary, his face swollen and covered in tears, desperately tried to explain the situation by begging Granada to listen. He argued that since even legendary heroes had fallen in Era Urgust, it was impossible for mid-rank mercenaries like them to survive. He claimed they had no choice but to flee if they wanted to live, but Granada reacted with fury. Shouting that survival was no excuse for abandoning a captain, he attacked the man. A blonde female knight suddenly interrupted by calling out to Granada. Introducing herself as a hero named Cade, she explained that unavoidable circumstances had prevented her from joining the expedition initially, but she had now arrived to take part. Granada was visibly confused, questioning why a hero would appear there so late. Meanwhile, some of his subordinates, already drunk and rowdy, joked that Cade had been paying for their drinks while Granada was away. After silencing them with a blow and ordering them to be quiet, Granada acknowledged her generosity, but informed her that the expedition had already ended. Stunned by the news, Cade struggled to accept that Hillen Cargill and the others had already left Holton Walk. She apologized for her bold request and asked Granada to describe the expedition's failure in detail. Internally, Granada resolved to share only the information the Demon King had authorized. Later, as they sat in a restaurant, Granada recounted the events. After listening carefully, a skeptical Cade handed him several gold coins as a thank you gift. Realizing the Demon King's tower was never actually at the summit, she concluded there was no reason to stay. Once she departed, Granada's men dismissed her as an idealistic hero who didn't understand how the world worked, predicting she would eventually be betrayed. Granada remained silent, carefully observing the knights as they left. The scene then shifted to a deserted alley in Holton Walk, where Cade arrived and announced it was time to return, noting that the princess's fiancé was waiting for them. The princess firmly rejected the suggestion, refusing to return and declaring her resolve to live as a hero instead. From his hiding place, Granada secretly observed the exchange, his curiosity piqued by the masked, shadowy figures whose expressions remained hidden. He soon realized that the hero in question was actually the princess herself, yet he understood that royal affairs were not his to interfere with. The situation turned dire when a knight suddenly appeared and pressed a sword to Granada's throat. Trembling with fear, Granada was accused of spying and using suspicious magic. He panicked, realizing the magical artifact in his possession, a gift from the Demon King, would expose his true identity if he were captured. As the knight grew more menacing, he labeled Granada a foreign spy and declared his intention to execute him on the spot. Frantically questioning his choice of hiding spot, Granada thought of the Demon King as his mind raced to find an escape. The moment their eyes met, Granada bolted toward the palace entrance. Alarms erupted behind him as the knights shouted that an assassin was on the loose, urging one another not to let him slip away. Though shock spread at the idea of an intruder, the knights did not hesitate. They quickly formed a protective wall around the princess. Granada knew that any hesitation would lead to his death, but the situation reached a point of no return when the knights released a barrage of arrows at him. Suddenly, the Demon King appeared, casually noting that he had been wondering why Granada was taking so long. With a display of overwhelming power, he effortlessly shattered the incoming arrows in midair. As a stunned Granada watched, unable to grasp what had just happened, the Demon King spread his wings and rose into the sky. A magical flame formed calmly in his hand, as he mockingly suggested that Granada must have been wasting his time playing around in such a place. The Demon King brushed the situation aside, casually noting that wounds which healed easily weren't worth such a fuss. This dismissive attitude frustrated Granada, whose demeanor made it clear he viewed the matter with far more gravity. Meanwhile, panic erupted among the knights. They shouted as if a nightmare had come to life, convinced the Demon King had arrived to abduct the princess for a dark sacrifice. Urging them not to hesitate, the princess declared this their chance to capture him and commanded an attack regardless of her own safety. The Demon King turned toward her, showing a flicker of surprise at this new revelation. Amidst the chaos and angry shouts of the confused knights, he remained composed, explaining that his presence was a mere coincidence while he was out on an errand. The narrative then shifted back to an earlier moment inside a quiet tower. As the Demon King listened, the princess requested some senile powder, a substance he knew was used to facilitate spirit contracts. With a gentle smile, she confirmed his suspicion and shared a story from centuries ago. She described how an elf named Sel had returned to the human realm, where the king tasked her with making spirit contracts easier for humans to achieve. After years of research, Sel successfully developed senile powder. The Demon King turned his attention back to the princess, pointing out that her natural talent should make such a substance unnecessary. Looking slightly saddened, she suggested he was overestimating her. She explained that because the tower lacked sufficient mana, her spirits would struggle to function without the powder's help. When the Demon King revealed he was also considering a contract with a high-level spirit, the princess became visibly flustered and turned away in embarrassment. Mirroring her own emotions, her spirits of fire and water mimicked her reaction perfectly. Reflecting on memories from a past life, she recalled that Hernan had made a contract with a high-level spirit at age 27, a feat so rare it had plunged the entire continent into chaos. However, this monumental event was now occurring 7 years earlier than anticipated, as she had hoped to keep it a secret. Having finished his cookie, the Demon King casually remarked that he had eaten well before standing up to depart. Returning to the present, Berger raised his hand to form a dense, overwhelming flame of mana, stating his intent to settle matters quickly due to his own circumstances. The Night Princess froze as he unleashed the fire, causing a massive explosion to swallow the battlefield. When the smoke cleared, everything had been annihilated except for the princess, who remained standing while a powerful green aura flowed from her body. Surprising the Demon King, she ignored his warnings and charged forward. She proclaimed that a warrior's aura was the natural enemy of demons and could destroy them, rejecting her royal life in favor of the battlefield. Unleashing the Crescent Slash, the pinnacle of Jespine's swordsmanship, she sent an attack that detonated the air as it surged toward her foe. During the fight, she thought of her past as a political pawn treated with insignificance. She had endured brutal training solely to be recognized as a warrior, believing that killing the Demon King would finally grant her freedom and respect. Risking everything on this resolve, she was met with a calm counterattack as the Demon King gathered his aura and shattered her blade. She stood paralyzed as the fragments scattered, watching a dark red aura erupt from his body while he rose to dominate the battlefield. His presence filled her with terror as he mockingly noted that someone who was both a warrior and a princess could be quite useful. As fear took hold, the knights rushed forward to shield her, but the Demon King released another massive explosion. His aura consumed the area, and minutes later, only silence remained over the torn ground and the motionless knights. Soon, 2 healers arrived at the scene. Upon witnessing the devastation, the healers immediately concluded that a demon was responsible. They discovered a wounded knight and fought to keep him conscious. With his fading strength, he managed to mention the princess and the Demon King, leaving the healers paralyzed with shock. The scene then moved to the dungeons of the Tower of Burge, where the Demon King had brought the unconscious warrior princess, her body battered and bruised from the conflict. As another princess examined the prisoner and questioned her mental state, the Demon King clarified that she was actually the 9th princess, Cuddy Jess Pine. He decided she would reside on the 4th floor and ordered that she be treated well, noting her potential usefulness if raised correctly. When asked why he had brought another royal, he casually explained that he had simply found her along the way, adding that kidnapping royalty was an effective method for gaining magi points. He quickly realized he had nearly shared a secret when the princess asked for clarification, so he denied his words and claimed she had misheard him. Shifting the subject, he promised to bring her senile powder before leaving, silently reminding himself to maintain his distance since she was merely a prisoner. Soon after, news of the 9th princess's abduction by the Jess Pine Empire spread across the continent. At the Hero Guild headquarters, Hyland stood at the center of an interrogation where his peers confirmed the honesty of his report. Hyland bowed his head, accepting full responsibility for failing to locate the enemy fortress. However, another hero reassured him, arguing that blaming a warrior for such an outcome would only discourage future leaders. Feeling relieved, Hyland expressed his gratitude just as new information arrived. The Demon King had kidnapped the 9th princess during the retreat. Although the Empire demanded a call to arms, Hyland proposed a reconnaissance mission instead of an immediate declaration of war. He reasoned that a truly powerful Demon King would have no need to hide, suggesting that such secrecy was a sign of weakness. The heroes supported his logic, and a senior member announced that a full-scale assault would be suspended until the tower's location was confirmed. As Hyland bowed, he privately wondered if this delay was exactly what the Demon King intended, realizing he had successfully bought them more time. Back at the tower, the Demon King reviewed Hyland's report and instructed him to continue his observations. Berger privately acknowledged that without Hyland's intervention, the warriors would have already launched their assault, leading him to consider the hero's recruitment as one of his finest moves. While Hyland and Granada used their influence on the outside to cause further delays, the Demon King focused on his own objectives. By kidnapping royalty, he steadily increased his demonic points and resources. He also prepared to utilize the potent Armanis beads as a primary energy source, while the dwarves reinforced the tower until it was nearly impenetrable. With Krutu's power expanding through high-level spirit contracts, including one with Princess Hernan, Berger concluded that even elite warriors would now fail to defeat him. As the tower neared completion, his mind turned toward a stealthy revenge against those who had killed him in his past life, specifically targeting Amor, the renowned city of magic and engineering. The scene then shifted to the kingdom of Akan, home to that very city. On the edge of the world's largest magic market sat an unremarkable little shop called Jettison's Paradise. Inside, the shopkeeper sat lazily behind his counter, weary and bored as he flipped through a newspaper. His thoughts drifted to the latest rumors, from the kidnapping of the 9th princess following the failed expedition to the growing public anger over the Hero Guild's inaction. The reports even mentioned that a hero named Lager was now being hunted. Absorbing these grim updates, the man muttered to himself that it truly felt like the end of the world was near. The ringing of the doorbell suddenly announced a new customer, the Demon King. The seller immediately straightened his posture, ditching his boredom for an enthusiastic, bright smile as he asked how he could help. Paying little attention to this exaggerated friendliness, Berger scanned the dusty, run-down shop with clear disinterest. He finally asked for a specific powder, remembering that the princess had personally requested it. Hearing the order, the shopkeeper's excitement spiked. With sparkling eyes, he proudly confirmed they had it in stock and began chatting with excessive cheer. As the Center for Magic Engineering, the Kingdom of Akan continued to draw heroes, mages, and alchemists from every corner of the globe. Because these renowned shops were constantly packed with powerful individuals, the risk of being detected remained high, even when concealing demonic energy. This was precisely why Berger had sought out such a quiet, isolated store with almost no customers. Eagerly presenting 2 glass vials, the shopkeeper laughed and told him he was in luck today. However, upon examining one of the containers, Berger noticed the powder was purple instead of the usual green, and questioned the difference. Lowering his voice, the seller excitedly explained that this was a secret, unreleased version developed within the Mage Tower. He privately assumed his customer was a wealthy noble, believing no ordinary person would travel to such a shabby, remote location. Berger immediately saw through the man's intentions. His expression darkened as he realized the shopkeeper was trying to extort him, sensing his limited options. Although a surge of anger made him consider killing the man on the spot, the shop doorbell rang again before he could act. The seller instantly shifted his cheerful enthusiasm toward the newcomers. As a group stepped inside, one whispered in disbelief, wondering why they were searching such a rundown place. Berger froze when he recognized the arrivals as Princess Louise and her knights. One knight calmly suggested to Louise that if the man named Lager had any sense, he would avoid crowded areas. Clearly irritated, the princess complained about being forced into such a filthy shop. This caused Berger some unease, as he was the one who had kidnapped Lager. While a knight politely explained their search to the seller, Berger carefully studied Louise, noting her sharp temper and distinctive twin-tailed hair. He became certain she was Louise Werft, but he reassured himself that she wouldn't recognize him thanks to the magic item concealing his identity. The shopkeeper gave an awkward laugh, acknowledging that the knights were looking for someone. However, he made the absurd claim that he suffered from a strange condition where his memory would fail unless he made a sale first. While the knight reacted with pure shock at such a bizarre statement, Louise flew into a rage. Hurling insults at the man, she stepped forward and pressed her blade against his throat. The panicked seller screamed for his life, desperately reminding them that murder was a crime in the capital. Even while trembling, he pleaded that if they intended to threaten him, they should at least buy something. He seemed willing to accept any punishment as long as a transaction took place, a level of madness that left the Demon King speechless. Surprisingly, Louise's anger turned into amusement. She burst into laughter, finding the man interesting enough to see what he was offering. Seizing the moment, the merchant quickly rebranded the sin powder as Arch Powder. He proudly presented it as a rare treasure for dwarven masters, shamelessly set the price at 3 gold coins. Watching this, the Demon King grew furious, realizing the man was now deceiving Louise just as he had tried to scam him. To his surprise, Louise was perfectly satisfied. She bought the powder with a smile and even offered the man a blessing before asking if a dwarf named Lager had visited recently. The seller claimed he had never heard the name, but suggested they check a well-known blacksmith gathering spot in Aachen. As she prepared to leave, Louise quietly expressed her disgust at the man's shameful behavior, and her knights followed her out. Once the shop was empty, the Demon King addressed the merchant with a faint smirk, mockingly admiring his boldness in selling worthless powder for such a high price. The seller simply grinned with pride as he pocketed the gold, clearly pleased with his successful deception. The seller smirked, admitting he stayed quiet because Louise looked like a wealthy noble who would pay 3 gold without a second thought. He added that for 10 gold, he would even be willing to share a secret. Although the Demon King internally labeled the man a scammer, he found his boldness entertaining. Leaning in, he advised the merchant to join the Golden Moon Merchant Guild, claiming the mountain had sent him. The confused seller questioned why anyone would join a failing guild, but his attitude shifted instantly when the truth was revealed. He had just scammed the mad dog princess, Louise Werft. Terror washed over the man as he realized his mistake. His hands shook, causing the glass vials to shatter on the floor as he turned pale with fright. When he demanded to know what the Demon King wanted, a single gold coin was placed on the counter. The offer was simple: join the guild for a monthly salary of 1 gold or face Louise's return. Initially, the seller begged for mercy, but his fear suddenly turned into a mocking grin. He angrily ordered the Demon King to leave, daring him to bring the princess back. Without another word, the Demon King departed, muttering that things would go exactly as the man wished. He went straight to Louise and explained the deception. Infuriated, she stormed back to the shop, leaving the merchant completely broken. Outside, the Demon King examined a vial and realized that even the poorest shops sold genuine sin powder, silently cursing the seller's greed. Louise eventually approached him to express her sincere gratitude for helping her recover the money. When asked what happened to the merchant, she clenched her fist, regretting that she could only give him a small lesson in a foreign land rather than ripping his heart out. As a knight tried to calm the raging princess, the Demon King grew uneasy, reminded of how dangerous she truly was. He quickly changed the subject by asking about Lager. Louise's mood brightened instantly as she confirmed Lager was a blacksmith. The Demon King then presented a necklace, which the knight recognized as one of the dwarf's early works. Fabricating a story, the Demon King claimed he had helped a starving logger in Ormoth 2 months prior and received the jewelry in thanks. Overwhelmed with emotion, Louise gripped the necklace tightly, expressing her deep gratitude and wishing she could host him properly, an offer that only made the Demon King more uncomfortable. After Louise handed him an emblem that could be traded for the finest gear in the dwarven kingdom, the Demon King accepted it calmly before she and her knights departed. As they left, one of her companions inquired about their next move. Louise declared her intent to call for reinforcements, vowing that Lager would not escape her. Once they were gone, the Demon King's thoughts turned inward, focusing on a single, resurfacing memory: the heart. He realized that following his regression, he had overlooked a critical event involving Draxen discovering a mystic beast's heart. By absorbing it, Draxen had gained immense power, the very thing the Demon King now craved in his new life. Understanding his current limits, the Demon King recognized that dimensional interference was still severely restricting his true strength. He knew that in a fair fight against a fully equipped Louise, victory would be uncertain at best. Such a narrow margin was insufficient for his plans of survival and revenge. Consequently, he reached a strategic decision to lure Louise to Ormouth, the site of the Tower of Beasts. He anticipated a brutal clash between the Mad Dog Princess and the Beast King, Draxen. While they tore each other apart in conflict, he would wait in the shadows for the perfect moment to claim the prize for himself. The scene then shifted to the dense jungle of the Rainforest Kingdom. Pushing through thick vines with her companions close behind, the dwarf princess received an urgent report from a subordinate regarding an ultimatum from airborne officers. An anonymous source had demanded their immediate withdrawal, yet she refused to slow down, her eyes burning with a firm determination to find her target. Despite the cold sweat on her face and her team's warnings to stay within permitted areas, her anger overcame any hesitation. She insisted there were still places left to search, her gaze eventually locking onto the distant, forbidden Beast Mountain. Ignoring the desperate pleas of her fellow dwarves to stop, she marched toward the Beast King's dangerous domain, confidently asserting that no one would dare touch her. Sweat soaked her armor, yet the dwarf princess's eyes burned with excitement as she laughed, welcoming any challenge. She reminded her followers of their royal status and the fact that the entire continent relied on their kingdom's craftsmanship. If anyone desired war, she was ready to give it to them. Her small doll companion nervously whispered about the possibility of being deceived by the man they trusted, wondering if there were ever any loggers in the forest at all. Glaring sharply, the princess coldly acknowledged the risk, but threatened to knock the doll's head off if it didn't stay quiet. She then marched toward the distant tower, muttering that the Demon King's situation was becoming grave. Inside the fortress, the Wolf Demon King looked up as a servant arrived to report that the reckless princess was approaching Beast Mountain. Shocked and angry, he suspected she intended to interfere with the heart of Reincarnation. He knew the chamber was protected by absolute security, powered by a magma core that even 10,000 spirits could not move. Frustrated that trouble had arrived just as his work reached its final stage, he suddenly roared for his forces to stop her immediately. However, he strictly commanded that she must not be killed or seriously injured, a task the demon servant admitted would be nearly impossible to achieve. Back in the woods, a towering, muscular figure blocked the princess's path, his deadly voice questioning if she had come there seeking death. Unintimidated, she narrowed her eyes and declared that dwarven pride would never yield to threats. The man countered that entry into the Demon King's territory was strictly forbidden. Gripping his sword, he reminded her with a dark chuckle that she should have been warned, noting that anyone wandering into such a place faced the constant risk of being killed by demons. The man, revealed to be Max, the Prince of Ormus, ordered the dwarf princess to step aside, demanding she not return until the missing logo was found. Max's face twisted with annoyance as he muttered about the dwarves' lack of intelligence, recalling the massive war a year earlier near the kingdom of Jasper. Ignoring the worried cries of her subordinates, the princess kept her gaze fixed solely on Max. He began to explain the laws of his land, but she cut him off with a sneer, declaring she had heard enough. As both prepared to strike, the very forest trembled under their mounting power. Suddenly, several men emerged from the shadows, shouting that it was their turn to collect the rewards. Max tightened his grip and ordered his followers to kill everyone. As hunting hounds and soldiers surrounded the princess to block her escape, Max proclaimed that they would all die for the sake of Ormus's prosperity. Fueled by rage, the princess raised her massive axe and shouted at those daring to challenge her. In the distance, the thunderous sound of demonic galloping began to echo. Inside his tower, the Wolf Demon King roared in disbelief. He realized the Ormus forces intended to murder the princess and frame him, potentially triggering a massive offensive like the one from 2 centuries ago. He immediately dispatched monstrous demons, grimly resolving that the princess must survive. Back on the battlefield, blood and violent mana stained the earth as Max's allies precisely cut down the dwarves. Amidst the chaos, a golden shield flared around the princess. She shouted for her soldiers to be freed, but a wounded dwarf pleaded with her to flee, arguing that the enemy's advantage was too great to win head-on. Clenching her teeth with burning fury, she ignored her doll companion's pleas to calm down and declared she would smash everything herself. Max sneered at her, mocking her for hiding behind a shield like a turtle while his mana blazed. Suddenly, a violent explosion of purple energy blinded and overwhelmed Max. He froze in shock, wondering if a subordinate of the Beast King had arrived. As the dark purple aura intensified, a cold voice echoed through the trees, remarking that the Ormus attack was unplanned and that humans were truly unpredictable. Max's eyes widened as he realized the being before him was no mere beast. Under the Demon King's suffocating presence, both Max and the princess began to tremble. Finally, Pierce Doss appeared with a mocking smile, coldly ordering the Princess of Ormus to die. Activating his magical equipment with a look of grim determination, a soldier shouted that high-level demons had emerged. Simultaneously, the Demon King released a suffocating aura that acted like a physical weight, completely binding Max. As the crushing pressure froze him in place, Max shouted in a state of confused shock. In that very instant, Princess Louise leapt forward with incredible speed, closing the gap in the blink of an eye. Although some of Max's troops found the courage to threaten her for attacking the prince, they struggled to even stand against the terrifying power radiating from her. Louise's expression hardened as she retorted that, since they had come to kill her first, she would now send them to join their prince. The battlefield erupted into further chaos as dwarven reinforcements arrived, immediately forming a protective circle around the princess and launching a fierce counterattack. Explosions and violent shockwaves tore through the trees, yet the Demon King watched the carnage with unreadable eyes. He quietly remarked that Louise would not perish there and decided it was finally time to set his true plan in motion, his gaze shifting toward the distant Beast Tower. An immense trembling surge of energy began to radiate from the structure, thick enough to make the air itself feel heavy. Inside the tower, the Beast King was consumed by rage upon realizing another lord had sent demons into his territory. He understood that the timing, with the princess and Ormith forces already clashing outside, was far too perfect to be an accident. Driven to see the situation personally, he rushed to the battlefield and demanded an update on the dwarf princess and the invading demon. His nervous soldiers explained that by the time they reached the scene, the princess was already surrounded by Ormith's troops. This news only fueled his anger as he feared a repeat of the Great War from 2 centuries ago. However, the reality of the battlefield was quite different. Princess Louise was already engaged in a brutal, unstoppable assault, cutting down every enemy in her path. Not a single soldier could stand against her, and even her own men shouted for her to stop before the fight turned into a total slaughter. The soldier lowered his head and finished his report to the Beast King, explaining that the princess had managed to resolve everything on her own, leaving them unable to assist. This news only irritated the Beast King, who struck the soldier while warning his men not to confuse him with such incompetence. Trembling under his leader's overwhelming fury, the man fell to his knees and apologized repeatedly. Soon, more troops and powerful beasts arrived to deliver a startling update. Prince Max had been killed by the dwarf princess. When a soldier asked how to handle the surviving Ormith warriors, the Beast King paused, his dark expression showing he was carefully calculating his next move. He finally ordered his men to capture the survivors alive, emphasizing that their testimony was essential to ensure he wouldn't be falsely accused. Turning to the rest of his troops, he sharply demanded to know if the demon who invaded his territory had been located. The soldier's awkward hesitation only fueled his frustration, leading him to call them pathetic and insult their useless senses. However, his anger soon shifted into deep thought. He realized that if the intruder was a high-level demon specializing in stealth, it was no surprise his subordinates couldn't find it. Muttering that it had been a long time since he faced such a challenge, the Beast King activated sensory super-maximization, a technique that heightens the senses by channeling magic into the sensory organs. This mastery allowed him to detect even the faintest traces of stealth magic. Detecting an unfamiliar demonic presence, he grew dark with the suspicion that the intruder might be chasing the dwarf princess. He immediately demanded to know her direction, and before the soldier could even finish pointing the way, the Beast King vanished. Rushing forward with incredible speed, his furious roar echoed through the forest as he cursed the Demon King. In that moment, the Beast King finally grasped the full picture. His eyes widened as the truth crystallized. The dwarf princess, the Prince of Ormus, and even the deliberate exposure of magic were all components of a single scheme designed to lure him away from the volcano. Rage surged through him like wildfire, his aura exploding violently as he raced toward the mountain, the very ground cracking under his feet while the wind howled in his wake. Deep within his territory, a massive cave near the volcano was under heavy guard. Beast warriors stood watch while bear demons moved materials with disciplined urgency, the entire secret operation functioning in perfect coordination. Further inside, the Demon King had already reached the heart of the hideout. Standing before a pool of extraordinary, unnaturally glowing lava, he observed its strange energy. He noted that this was no typical molten flow. It was a conduit for the energy of return. He reasoned that even someone as tough as Draxen couldn't have survived a leap into it, suggesting the lava had been engineered to drain him. However, the Demon King remained unconcerned. As dark energy rose around him, he activated a mysterious ability, explaining that his black dragon scales allowed him to move freely even within such heat. His presence did not go unnoticed for long. A sharp-eyed tiger demon sensed him and launched an immediate full-strength attack. Despite the deadly intent behind the strike, the Demon King stopped the weapon effortlessly with a single hand. Without a hint of trouble, he remarked that it was inevitable for a high demon to discover him at such close range. The tiger demon bared his fangs and shouted for him to stop, but the Demon King coldly told the creature he was coming along. He then dragged the demon into the lava. While the tiger demon's screams echoed through the cavern as his body was instantly vaporized, the Demon King remained untouched. Protected by his black scales, he continued his descent into the blazing depths as if the molten fire were nothing at all. A faint smile crossed the Demon King's face as he pondered the true nature of the recovery powers he had gained. Deep within the molten depths, a phoenix appeared, its presence radiating immense strength even amidst the lava. He recalled from his days as a cadet that these legendary creatures existed across multiple dimensions, ranging from divine spirits to ultimate destroyers of entire realms. Although their power varied by form, history was consistent on one point. Any demon lord who successfully absorbed a phoenix earned a permanent place in the annals of their world. With quiet satisfaction, the Demon King silently thanked Draxen, realizing that because his rival had claimed this power in a previous life, the opportunity now belonged to him. He was finally within reach of the strength he had always envied, and he was determined to use it to forge his own legend. As he reached out, an overwhelming light erupted from his palm, so brilliant that it illuminated the distant mountains and the sky above. Watching the blinding radiance from afar, the Beast King roared in a fit of shock and rage, demanding to know who had discovered his prize. He briefly considered if Daius was responsible, but quickly dismissed the idea, knowing the man never moved without a guaranteed profit. Upon reaching the cave entrance, he pushed past his stammering guards who were trying to report a demonic intruder. He ordered everyone to stay back as he marched deeper inside, muttering that neither Ugar nor Rena could be behind this. One lacked the intellect for such a plan, while the other's ice attributes made the Phoenix's fire unbearable. Turning sharply to his troops, he demanded to know if they were safe. When a soldier hurriedly reported that the tiger demon had suddenly leapt into the lava, the Beast King snapped in total disbelief, declaring such an act impossible. The trembling soldier further explained that the tiger demon had claimed he was going to steal the prize, just as another voice shouted a warning about the Demon King's dangerous presence inside. A massive light began to pour from the cave's depths, growing more brilliant by the second until it was visible from miles away. From their distant positions, Princess Louise, Granada, Hylan, and Princess Elena stood in stunned silence with their troops, watching the radiant eruption. Meanwhile, the Beast King reached a breaking point. His aura exploded with uncontrollable rage as he swore to kill the intruder, while the phoenix finally revealed itself within the flames. In a dense forest elsewhere, a sharp, unnatural sound echoed before silence returned. Daius lay motionless on the ground, seemingly lifeless, until his eyes finally flickered open minutes later. Staring up at the tangled canopy in confusion, he struggled to remember how he had arrived. Although wolves and other forest creatures gathered to watch the stranger, none attacked. Disoriented, Daius pushed himself up as the memory of the phoenix returned. He had planned to kill it and store it in his subspace, but the volcanic eruption had hurled him across the sky. When he reached a nearby stream to wash, he froze at his reflection, realizing his face had completely changed. In Ormus, Princess Louise reported the recent battle to the king. Though his warriors had fought bravely, the news of his son's death filled the king with a thirst for vengeance, leading him to order a massive expedition to destroy the beast demon king. Back in the woods, Daius received a call from Hylan, who was visibly shocked by his master's new appearance. Hylan reported that an army of 500, including 200 famous heroes led by Rosal Chart and Balaf Dislord, was preparing to assault the Tower of Beasts. While some groups wanted the Demon King alive for his resources, Daius decided Hylan should join the mission to personally kill the Beast King and boost his own reputation. Shortly after, Gordon arrived with news that Draxen had summoned several other leaders, including Belvic and Reyna, to defend his fortress. Understanding the urgency, Daius shifted into his demonic form and took flight, his wings igniting with the Phoenix's surging mana. He streaked across the sky like a comet, crashing into his tower's barrier but managing to stabilize himself safely. Once his safety was confirmed, Gordon prepared a portal to the Tower of Beasts. Meanwhile, heroes from various regions assembled. Among them, Rosal drew immense admiration by boldly vowing to defeat the Beast King, while Hylan privately resolved that the ultimate victory would be his. Upon their arrival at the summit, Daius, Gordon, and Jason were calmly greeted by Draxen, who led them into the meeting chamber. Daius noted to himself that being late to such a gathering would have been a mistake. Once the group had settled, Belvic questioned the need for such haste. Jason pointed out the gathering hero forces, leading Draxen to reveal a troubling truth. A rival demon king had secretly sent an acetate demon into his lands to steal the phoenix corpse he had been preparing to absorb. Furthermore, this intruder had caused the death of the second prince of Ormus, which was the direct catalyst for the current hero expedition. The other leaders silently weighed these words. Some wondered if Draxen had been hiding the phoenix all along, while others felt that provoking Ormus into a full-scale war suggested a deliberate plot to destroy him. Draxen continued his explanation, suggesting that this mysterious enemy might also be behind the death of the dwarf princess, potentially aiming to ignite a continent-wide conflict. Looking around the room, he warned that while someone present might be trying to eliminate him, he would not fall alone. To uncover the traitor, he announced his intention to purchase the black box key. This device, installed within the tower, recorded the movements of demon kings to analyze past operations. Although most leaders considered the system an unnecessary waste of energy points, especially since it would vanish if the tower fell, Draxen was determined to use it. This revelation deeply troubled Daius, who realized that if the black box were opened, the truth would be impossible to hide. Draxen explained that he could not activate the device alone, as the system required authorization from the specific demon king who controlled the tower where it was installed. Looking at the other rulers, he requested their permission to open the black boxes within their domains, reasoning that whoever was responsible for the chaos would likely refuse. A heavy silence filled the room as Daius listened with growing unease, realizing the situation had become far more perilous than anticipated. However, the tension soon faded as the demon kings, including the demon queen, granted their approval without hesitation. Satisfied, Draxen noted that the process would begin at his discretion and dismissed the meeting, promising to share the results once they were obtained. Further details about the black box key revealed it to be a rare, single-use item costing a staggering 9,999 demon power points. Due to this immense price, most rulers avoided it entirely. Draxen had no intention of purchasing the key immediately, as spending such a massive amount of energy while a hero expedition prepared to attack his tower would be reckless. Instead, he planned to wait until the heroes were defeated and the situation stabilized. Once he acquired the key, he intended to open the black boxes belonging to Daius and Jason to finally expose the traitor. After returning to their own tower, Daius and Gordon began analyzing the threat. The possibility of the black box being activated weighed heavily on Daius, leading him to a singular conclusion. Draxen had to be eliminated before that could happen. With this objective in mind, he decided to inspect his own fortress before planning his next move. Gordon then informed him that the majority of the internal preparations for their tower were already complete. Daius suggested they start their inspection at the lowest level, so he and Gordon descended to the first floor of Berg Tower. They were immediately met by the sight of a colossal magical weapon that dominated the entire space, resembling a massive siege cannon designed for total devastation. Standing atop the machine was a proud and enthusiastic logger who eagerly introduced his latest masterpiece, the Hell's Catapult Mark I, forged in the fires of the Hellforge. As he boasted about its elegant and magnificent design, Dias and Gordon turned to leave, while the inventor shouted his thanks behind them, promising that his next creation would be even more powerful. On the second floor, they found Cater Day alone in the training area, practicing her swordsmanship with intense focus. The moment Dias entered, she lunged at him with impressive speed, but he effortlessly parried the strike. Remarking quietly that nothing had changed, he watched as a determined Cater activated the chin combat technique. She unleashed a refined, waxing moon attack, yet Dias neutralized it just as easily as the first. Though he admitted she had improved slightly, he noted she still had a long way to go. Before she could process how easily her best move had been stopped, Dias delivered a precise counterattack that nearly knocked her unconscious. Curious about her placement on this floor, Dias questioned Gordon, who explained that Cater had been moved to avoid disturbing Princess Hernan's delicate summoning ritual on the 4th floor. Meanwhile, the ritual on the 4th level was already reaching its peak. Standing inside a glowing magic circle, Hernan concentrated her energy and activated the spirit dust provided by Senile. With careful precision, she recited an ancient incantation to invoke a great water spirit, calling upon the guardian bound to her bloodline. As she spoke the sacred name of Hernan Hildoran, the chamber echoed with her voice until the ritual succeeded. A powerful water spirit, shimmering with vibrant blue energy, manifested within the circle and successfully linked its presence to Hernan's mana. The instant the bond was formed, a sudden surge of energy overwhelmed Hernan, causing her to lose her balance. Just as she began to collapse, Dias appeared with incredible speed to catch her. Supporting her carefully, he calmly remarked that he had arrived just in time and praised her for completing the ritual. A bit embarrassed, Hernan laughed softly and credited her success to the spirit dust she had used. However, the atmosphere shifted when a quiet voice suddenly declared its love for the Demon King. Though the words seemed to come from Hernan, she immediately panicked, insisting she had no control over what had just been said. The confusion was soon resolved when it became clear that the voice belonged to the newly summoned water spirit, not the princess. Hernan sighed, noting that she seemed to have called forth a very troublesome entity. Introducing herself as Naya Runiel, a high-ranking water spirit, her personality quickly emerged. She was a fan of dramatic romance novels and forbidden love. With cheerful enthusiasm, Naya Runiel teased that the Demon King surely already knew about Hernan's feelings, even asking when the two would officially start dating. This left Hernan flustered and red-faced, demanding to know what nonsense the spirit was talking about. Naya Runiel remained thoroughly entertained, playfully urging the princess to admit the rumors circulating in the spirit realm about her romantic involvement. Amused by the situation, she pressed for details on when the relationship had started. In her frustration, Hernan asked the spirit to return to her own domain to end the humiliation, but Naya Runiel had no intention of leaving. Stepping in with a serious tone, Dias interrupted the teasing to ask the high-ranking spirit for her honest impression of him. After studying him carefully, Naya Runiel smiled and described him as a refined, striking demon king who seemed perfectly suited for the princess. Maintaining his steady composure, he repeated the question once more. Dias suddenly activated his magic, causing an instantaneous transformation that left Hernan and Naya Runiel speechless. As his hair turned a vibrant red and his energy shifted dramatically, the intensity of the change caught them completely off guard. Analyzing the new sensation, Naya Runiel realized that the heavy demonic power he once radiated had vanished. In its place was a refined essence resembling pure monosine, a spiritual aura entirely unlike that of a demon lord. Surrounded by a blazing aura, Dias calmly explained the reason for his disguise. He noted that if even a superior spirit like Naya Runiel could be deceived, then other warriors and demon lords would surely fail to see through it as well. While he smiled confidently, reasoning that the Beast King could manage on his own for now, Hernan remained deeply confused. The rapid shift in the conversation and the unsettling idea of one demon king eliminating another left her struggling to process what she had just witnessed. Shortly after, the scene transitioned to Dias flying through the sky with determined speed. During his journey, a system notification appeared, showing a stressed and frantic Gordon who was clutching his hair in frustration. When Dias calmly asked for an update, Gordon shouted that the situation involved the Demon King. Though briefly surprised, Dias kept his cool. Gordon expressed total disbelief, unable to fathom why one ruler would target another. Dias firmly reminded him of his previous declaration to remove Draxen, a statement that only intensified Gordon's panic. He argued loudly that such an act broke ancient demonic laws, warning that the consequences would be uncontrollable if the other lords discovered the truth. Tightening his jaw, Dias acknowledged the gravity of the situation. Dias explained that he had to act quickly, as Draxen opening the black box first would turn the entire situation against him, leaving Dias to suffer the consequences. While Gordon acknowledged this reasoning, he argued that the logic didn't make the strategy any less perilous. He pointed out that Dias had yet to obtain Ryan dimensional energy and lacked the skill to control such a force. This energy, which exists between worlds, leaves a tiny margin for error for those who haven't mastered it. Every realm naturally resists foreign intruders by pushing back with overwhelming pressure. This defensive barrier of dimensional energy is enough to suppress an invader's abilities, causing demons to experience extreme weakening. For example, a demon with a power level of 666 in their own realm would be reduced to something closer to level 1 upon arrival in another world. In this nearly insignificant state, they would be forced to face the dimension's chosen guardians, who exist to maintain the world's balance. To overcome this natural suppression, the demon race developed a specialized invasion system known as the Demon King's Tower. Acting as a magical conduit, the tower links the demon world and the ruler to a flow of magical energy. By investing accumulated points into the structure, a demon king can gradually draw more power from home. As the tower grows taller, the connection strengthens and slowly restores their original power, making the building's height a direct reflection of its ruler's strength. However, this system has a major limitation. The farther a demon king travels from their tower, the thinner the energy supply becomes, causing their strength to decline. Gordon reminded Dias of a final, uncomfortable detail regarding their current situation. While their own tower had only reached the 5th floor, the Beast King's fortress already stood 13 levels high. Consequently, Gordon admitted that even with the title of Demon King, victory within the Beast King's territory was far from guaranteed. Dias calmly assessed the situation, acknowledging that while he had absorbed the Phoenix Heart, its power was not yet fully integrated. Because this energy remained unstable, he knew he couldn't completely dominate the other demon lords alone. However, a confident look soon crossed his face, which immediately signaled his next move to a panicking Gordon. Despite Gordon's attempts to object, Dias had already decided on a plan. Using his magic once more, he reshaped his appearance into a new persona and playfully introduced himself as Pale, announcing his intention to join the upcoming hero expedition. Meanwhile, a fierce battle raged in the distant region of Ormus, where Hillen's knights were locked in a violent struggle against invading demons. Although the knights had managed to take down several enemies, the battlefield was a scene of chaos and destruction, with many of them suffering serious injuries. Hillen surveyed the area with concern. Even though they had been pursued to this spot, the remaining demons finally seemed to be weakening. Moving quickly among his fallen comrades, Hillen knelt beside the wounded to offer healing potions and encourage them to regain their strength. One soldier could only groan in pain, barely able to sit up amidst the aftermath. Dias then arrived on the scene in his disguise as Pale, maintaining a calm and commanding presence. After observing the surrounding disorder, he asked Hillen to explain how things had escalated so far. When Hillen instinctively tried to address him formally, Dias gently corrected him, instructing him to use the name Pale instead. Hillen complied and described the events, noting that the expedition had launched its planned assault on the Beast King's tower. Their strategy had been to target the Beast King's vulnerability, specifically his tails, and they had managed to inflict significant damage. However, the confrontation had turned far more difficult than expected. Draxen had unleashed such overwhelming force that the battlefield fell into turmoil, forcing Hillen to retreat under intense pressure while urgently calling for Rosal to execute their plan. Watching Rosal collapse, Hillen's expression turned to horror. She lay severely injured, her face bloodied as she struggled to stay conscious. The situation worsened when Hillen spotted Draxen standing directly behind her. Reacting instantly to the danger, he rushed forward to pull her up. With his arm around her for stability, he shielded her from further strikes and fled the battlefield. As the memory of their withdrawal from the Beast King faded, Hillen finished his account in the present. His voice was heavy with regret, as he explained that Rosal's critical condition had made continuing the assault impossible, leaving retreat as their only choice. The expedition had failed. Deus listened silently, a faint smile briefly appearing as he processed the story. Suddenly, his expression stiffened as the pieces of the puzzle aligned with unsettling clarity. Everything had fallen apart. Hillen noted that despite their retreat, they had dealt the Beast King a heavy blow, though his own knights were now exhausted and in desperate need of medical care. While Daius ran rapid calculations in his mind, Rosal watched him with growing curiosity. She questioned his identity and his reasons for helping, unable to ignore a strange, pure warmth radiating from him that she had never felt before. Before answering, Deus surveyed the wounded knights. Although their physical injuries were healing, their spirits remained crushed, and he knew that broken morale would make them useless in the coming fight against Draxen. To restore their resolve, he decided to reveal a fraction of his power. Instructing everyone to watch him, he began to rise into the air as a golden, flame-like aura expanded around him. To the knight's shock, a massive phoenix silhouette unfolded its blazing wings across the sky. Introducing himself as Pale, the wielder of the phoenix, he declared his simple goal: to defeat the Beast King. Rosal's eyes widened as she realized the legendary nature of his power. His mana output alone placed him on the level of an elite 10-star warrior. This display immediately revitalized the battlefield, turning the knight's despair into newfound confidence. As the soldiers straightened their posture and stood up, Hillen felt his own determination return. Even under a new identity, Deus's natural leadership was already guiding the group toward victory. None of the soldiers suspected that the mysterious warrior, Pale, was actually the Demon King in disguise. Meanwhile, Draxen stood before his allies and announced his plan to reclaim the tower. Having spent more demonic energy than anticipated, he could only acquire a single black box key, so he decided to save the others for later. With unwavering focus, he gripped the key and called out to his hidden foe as he began opening the box of a consenting ruler. An ominous dark aura immediately filled the room, but as Draxen tried to uncover the hidden truths, he realized with shock that the process was affecting him instead of being controlled. The system confirmed with 96% certainty that the box was beyond his manipulation. Frustrated and finally understanding his past mistakes, he urgently prepared to warn the other lords. Just then, a servant rushed in to report that the heroes had invaded, led by a new 10-star champion named Ralph Schmitz. Draxen's expression darkened as Ralph entered his territory, his determined presence signaling the start of a massive battle. The story shifts to 1 hour earlier in Ormouth, where tension gripped the battlefield. Berger hovered before the advancing troops, directly confronting them as they prepared their assault. Bolstered by the presence of the Phoenix, the soldiers' confidence rose to 93%. They dismissed the Demon King as a mere beast and charged forward with loud battle cries, vowing to slaughter the demons and claim their treasures. Watching them, Deus noted that while their morale had recovered, he remained skeptical about whether they could truly manage the Phoenix's mana. As the situation developed, Deus spoke calmly with Hilan and Roselle, pointing out that 10-star heroes alone wouldn't be sufficient and that reinforcements were necessary. Roselle, however, responded with a confident smirk. She revealed that luck was on their side, as a legendary hero had just requested to join their cause. At that moment, a new figure arrived whom Deus instantly identified as Ralph, a 10-star hero and the world's most formidable shield master. As the mission's vanguard, his presence immediately shifted the power balance of the coming conflict. The narrative then returns to the present within Draxen's kingdom, where Ralph was already engaged in combat. He moved through the battlefield with ease, slaughtering wolves and effortlessly blocking strikes. His shield radiated such immense spiritual power that every roar from the weapon sent the enemy into a panicked retreat. Watching this, Deus reflected on Ralph's status as the second greatest tank, a man whose shield could reflect any impact. Deus understood his lethality firsthand, remembering how Ralph had helped defeat him in a past life and mocked him afterward. Though a surge of memory-induced rage made Deus want to destroy the hero on the spot, he restrained himself to stay focused on Draxen. Roselle, her voice thick with frustration, noted that Ralph had only arrived after the initial expedition ended. She believed that had he been there sooner, they could have won without any casualties. As the troops advanced and announced the clearance of the first floor, their collective confidence soared. They pushed forward, eager to face the Demon King and end the struggle. However, Deus issued a stern warning to Roselle against underestimating their foe. He explained that every Demon King possesses a final trump card, an instinctive, lethal move used only when death is near. Deus realized that if Draxen had exhausted his energy reclaiming the tower, he might be forced to reveal this hidden power, providing a rare opportunity to witness it. The scene then shifts to the 13th floor of the Beast Tower, the Demon King's chamber. An eerie silence filled the room where Draxen sat alone on his throne, his eyes glowing a deep blood red. When Ralph and his knights entered cautiously, they were confused to find the final floor completely empty of other demons. Without warning, Draxen raised his hand and formed a sphere of demonic energy. Treating the heroes with contempt, he remarked that while he hadn't expected them so soon, he had been preparing for their return. Razel was shocked by the density of his energy, realizing the other demons were missing for a reason. Opening his mouth to release a beam of aura, Draxen confirmed he had absorbed all his vassals into himself to eliminate the invaders in one strike. Deus noted that this defied typical dungeon strategy. Rather than placing guards on the upper floors, Draxen had consolidated all his power within his own body. His glowing red eyes intensified as Draxen vowed to erase them so completely that they would never return. While Hillen, Rosalie, and Dias were visibly shaken, Ralph stayed focused. Sensing a critical shift, Dias realized the climax was approaching just as Draxen unleashed a deafening roar, his body exploding with dark red energy. Two knights charged forward despite a warning to stop, but their confidence shattered instantly when a massive shockwave blasted everyone backward. Hillen realized with horror that Draxen's magic had reached a new level, while Rosalie struggled to accept how easily their assault had failed. Surrounded by an overwhelming aura, Draxen's mere glare filled the room with terror, leaving the knights trembling and struggling to breathe. At this desperate moment, Dias intervened by activating a high-ranking defensive spell called Protect Phoenix, causing two radiant wings to emerge from his back. The atmosphere shifted instantly, and the others felt a wave of relief and gratitude for the legendary ability. Deus remained strictly focused, creating a barrier to protect the group and warning them to stay inside so they wouldn't become a burden. After they thanked him, Dias stepped forward without hesitation, joined by Hillen, Roselle, and Ralph as they prepared for the final confrontation. Observing them, Draxen noted that only 4 of his enemies could still move. He felt particularly irritated by the red-haired man, clearly failing to recognize Deus in his new disguise. Deus smiled quietly, knowing this ignorance gave him a tactical edge as the final clash began. The battle reached its peak when Draxen finally recognized his opponent. His rage exploded as he roared about the theft of the Phoenix, furious that Dias had dared to enter his tower. While his anger shook the very surroundings, Dias remained calm and used his authority to create a domain that removed all sound. With a smirk, Dias declared that he now controlled every noise on the battlefield. This move instantly nullified Draxen's roar and prevented enemies from hearing spell chants, shifting the advantage in their favor. Dias then unleashed a high-rank binding spell, but Draxen shattered the sage's chains with effortless, overwhelming force. Proclaiming that this was a hunt rather than a fight, Draxen promised to tear them apart. Even then, Dias mocked him, claiming he couldn't hear his barking, as Roselle urged the others to put their trust in Pale. Deus launched a direct assault, triggering a massive explosion that sent the battlefield into total chaos. As both sides traded relentless blows, their movements grew increasingly fast and unpredictable. Deus moved with such speed that Rosalie lost track of him, though Hillen dismissed her concern, noting that simply following orders was sufficient. Despite his disdain, Draxen acknowledged their daring as he roared that their actions were pure madness. The tension spiked when Deus suddenly shifted direction to reposition himself. Reacting instantly, a furious Draxen vowed that he would not leave the tower alive. As they locked eyes, a memory from their pre-battle strategy session surfaced. Deus had explained that speed was essential to overcoming Draxen's terrifying reflexes and massive frame. They needed to bind his feet to exploit his vulnerabilities. When Hillen doubted his ability to keep up, Deus confidently promised to provide a signal, leaving the knight puzzled about what that might be. Back in the present, the fight resumed as Draxen lunged forward to crush his opponent. Deus dodged the strike effortlessly and stopped to reveal Armani's orb. Draxen mocked the move, calling the artifact useless, but Deus calmly explained that its true purpose was to reveal a master's location to a vassal. Draxen scoffed, believing no vassals were present, but the signal had already been given. Hillen appeared instantly, leaping into the fray and activating the orb's power as he struck. Although the immense pressure made Hillen feel as if his head might explode, he pressed the attack regardless. Draxen was shocked that a hero would serve as a vassal, but Deus simply smirked, noting the effectiveness of the method for those who survive. Hillen's full-force strike sent shockwaves across the battlefield, cracking the ground and scattering debris, yet Draxen barely staggered. He mocked the pathetic attack, but was suddenly caught off guard by a blast of flames. The timing was perfect. Following the earlier plan, Rosalie had waited for an opening to pour all her pain and power into a single, decisive strike. In the present moment, Rosalie unleashed her full power, causing the air to distort under the intense pressure of her surging mana. As she targeted Draxen, the ground beneath her feet began to crack, and the heat became unbearable. She released a top-tier spell, the Satellite Cannon, which fired a massive blinding beam across the battlefield. The resulting explosion swallowed everything in fire and destruction. A brief, heavy silence followed as the smoke slowly cleared, with Hillen, Ralph, and Rosalie watching in tense anticipation. However, Draxen stood once more, his mad laughter echoing as he mocked their efforts. While the others felt a chill of fear, Deus remained composed, calmly calculating the situation as if he had expected such a difficult foe to survive. Draxen's fury reached a new peak as his mana exploded into a terrifying red aura that forced the heroes back. Proudly declaring himself the Demon King of Beasts, he charged at Deus with erratic, blinding speed, swearing that no one would leave the tower alive. Deus stepped back effortlessly, a faint grin appearing as he realized Draxen had become nothing more than a mindless beast consumed by rage. Just as Draxen attempted to use the power of the Phoenix to distort the surrounding space, Deus interrupted the buildup with a precise, sudden strike. Though screaming in pain, Draxen refused to fall, desperately claiming he would not die so easily. Recognizing an opening, Rosalie immediately targeted his weakness, his tails. She gathered her remaining mana and released a clean strike that severed one of them, causing Draxen to scream in agony. Seizing this opportunity, Deus used the Sage's chains to bind the Demon King instantly. Realizing he was in mortal danger, Draxen struggled violently, but the magical restraints held firm. At that moment, Ralph stepped forward, using his healing power to restore his allies' strength with a soothing blue aura before reinforcing himself for the final blow. As Draxen continued to curse them in his weakened state, the end finally arrived. In one clean motion, the Demon King was decapitated, and the battlefield fell silent. Standing over the fallen king with a faint smirk, Deus confirmed the struggle was over, bidding farewell to Draxen and declaring that he would now claim the Phoenix for himself. Hyland's blade sliced cleanly through the air and through Draxen's neck, sending the Demon King's head spinning away before it crashed heavily onto the ground. A brief, heavy silence fell over the area, followed by the triumphant cheers of the remaining heroes. As voices rose in unison to celebrate their victory, Hyland's thoughts twisted with a dark ambition beneath his proud expression. The cheers were insufficient, as he craved total worship and admiration. Suddenly, the celebration turned to chaos when the ground trembled and the tower began to collapse. Orders were barked through the panic to prioritize recovery potions for the 10-star heroes and grab any available treasure before fleeing the crumbling structure. Amidst the disorder, Deus stood still for a moment, his gaze fixed on Draxen's lifeless body. He wondered if the Demon King would have chosen a different path given another chance, but he quickly concluded that Draxen had remained a Demon King until the very end, leaving no room for change. As the structure continued to fail, urgency finally overtook reflection, and everyone fled with their recovered loot. Outside, Rosalie approached Hyland and sharply observed that he seemed to have planned everything from the start to ensure he was the one to decapitate the Demon King. Hyland effortlessly dismissed her claim as a misunderstanding caused by the chaos, but Rosalie remained skeptical, remembering how suspicious his late entry into the fight had felt. Although the Demon King had been less overwhelming than she anticipated, Rosalie couldn't deny that the battle had pushed them to their limits or overlook Hyland's contributions. She informed him that she had taken possession of the Demon King's corpse, and when asked if he objected, Hyland replied that he did not. Suddenly, urgent shouts drew Rosalie toward the ruins, where an unexpected discovery had been made. She froze at the sight of the kidnapped prince lying beside the unconscious third princess of the Akan kingdom, Lavinia Akan. As Lavinia slowly woke up, a shocked Rosalie demanded to know why she was there. Lavinia answered in her typical fragmented way, mentioning materials which led Rosal to realize the truth. The princess had entered the tower alone specifically to gather parts for creating a chimera. Rosal was left speechless, finding such a reckless act nearly impossible to believe. As Lavinia added disjointed remarks about monsters, Rosal's concern deepened while she pieced the situation together. The onlookers watched in confusion, baffled by Rosal's ability to interpret the princess's fragmented speech. Remaining focused, Rosal inquired if the Demon King had caused her any harm. Through Lavinia's scattered words about finances and creatures, Rosal quickly deduced that she had been trading monsters for money, a fact Lavinia confirmed without hesitation. As they departed, Berger reflected on the princess's behavior, noting that entering such a lethal environment alone to negotiate with a Demon King for research was not only impulsive, but dangerously unpredictable. The focus then shifted to the Hero Guild, where the elder heroes met to discuss the recent events. They expressed clear frustration over the destruction of the Beast Tower, which had served as a lucrative hunting ground. Despite the immense effort spent managing sponsors and 10-star heroes, an unaffiliated stranger, the owner of the Phoenix, had claimed the ultimate victory. Recognizing a significant shift in power, the elders stressed the importance of identifying this mysterious figure. Since this was the most decisive defeat of a Demon King since their arrival in Urgust, the guild decided it was time to re-establish strict authority over all heroes. Meanwhile, at the Ormus Royal Banquet Hall, the atmosphere was a mix of polite conversation and heavy grief. Overwhelmed by the rescue of his son and the fall of the Demon King, the king repeatedly thanked the heroes, urging them to enjoy the banquet despite the lack of preparation. While knights tried to convince the emotional king to rest, Rosal stood out in an elegant dress. Sipping a cocktail, she quietly observed the room, finding the drink surprisingly pleasant despite the somber mood. Hillen approached her with a compliment, noting that her outfit suited her well and sharing the news that the princess had safely returned to the Akan kingdom. When Rosal suspiciously asked if he was trying to flatter her, Hillen laughed, claiming such attempts were useless against her. As the conversation turned to Pale, Rosal expressed a strong desire to meet him to discuss the Phoenix, a sentiment echoed by others who wished to offer their thanks. In a move that shocked the room, Ralph spoke up to praise the Phoenix's owner. However, Hillen revealed that Pale had already departed, leaving the guests even more surprised. Finally, the narrative transitioned to Burgess Tower in the Urgus mountain range. There, a disbelieving Gordon thanked Berger, asking for confirmation that he had truly killed Draxen and returned successfully. Bergie's calm confirmation left Gordon in a state of shock, struggling to wrap his head around what had just happened. As he worried about the potential fallout, the Demon King told him to stop staring and took his seat on the throne. He explained that since Draxen was dead, the other rulers would surely reach out, and any absence on his part would only trigger their suspicion. Although Gordon agreed, the Demon King privately reflected on the fight, admitting he was still too weak. Even Draxen's last attack had been less powerful than expected due to his fragile condition. To survive what was coming, he knew he had to increase his own strength and further develop the power of the Phoenix. Just then, Jason sent a message calling for a meeting, the timing so perfect it seemed he already knew about Draxen's demise. While the Demon King feigned shock outwardly, he smirked at the situation internally. However, he was genuinely surprised by the news that a new Demon King had already descended, suggesting that higher powers had been remarkably well prepared. Still, with the Beast Tower destroyed and no evidence linking him to the murder, he felt secure enough to go. The gathering took place on the 13th floor of the Tower of Lies, attended by Jason, the Demon Queen of Bitter Cold, and Big Rock Belvec. A new figure, Vivian Blunt of the Blood Moon clan, stood among them to replace Draxen. The Demon King showed her no interest, merely correcting her on his name before sitting down. Vivian was caught off guard by his cold indifference, as she had expected a much warmer reception. Despite her orders to investigate him as the prime suspect in Draxen's fall, she found his dismissive attitude intriguing and began to think he might be easy to manipulate. To test him, Vivian approached as the meeting started, making small talk about the rare cooperation between their kind before focusing entirely on him. She boldly sat in front of him and admitted her interest, but the Demon King immediately questioned her behavior with clear irritation. Unfazed, Vivian claimed she was simply curious about the demon who had disrupted the entire realm. She smiled confidently, complimenting his looks and making a blunt, suggestive advance. Without a moment's hesitation, the Demon King pushed her hand away with a harsh insult. The succubus queen stood there stunned. She was unused to being rejected so easily, yet this man had dismissed her without a second thought. After Reincarnation irritably ordered Vivienne Blunt to sit down, Vivienne remained standing for a moment, shocked by the sharp tone. Reincarnation then firmly clarified that while the meeting was held to welcome Vivienne, its primary goal was to investigate the reasons behind Draxen's humiliating defeat. She reminded everyone to act with dignity. Jason, meanwhile, was surprised to see Lady Reincarnation personally presiding over the discussion. When Vivienne playfully suggested that Reincarnation also had a romantic interest in the same man, Reincarnation dismissed the comment as shallow and pathetic. Eventually, Vivienne took her seat, allowing Jason to restore order and resume the meeting. The conversation turned toward the 10-star heroes who led the current expedition. As the Demon Kings shared their individual findings, the discussion became repetitive until they reached the most critical topic, the sudden appearance of the mysterious owner of the Phoenix. Although their opinions and concerns varied, they ultimately agreed to investigate this new powerhouse thoroughly and remain extremely cautious. Internally, Berger realized that because he had been disguised as pale during the expedition, the other demons couldn't have been spying on him. However, he knew he would have to be far more careful about his identity from now on. When Vivienne Blunt, an inquisitor for Archduke Alkan, blew him a playful kiss, he simply looked away, deciding she wasn't worth his time. The scene then shifted to the first floor of Burr's tower, where Keed noticed that the surveillance had weakened. Sensing that the demons and Princess Ernan were absent, she decided to seize the moment and escape. She sprinted toward the exit, convinced that freedom was just beyond the door. However, Ernan suddenly appeared with her spirits to block the way, claiming she was stopping the escape for Keed's own safety and the tower's peace. Recognizing the danger of Ursus, Keed drew her sword and warned that staying would lead to unpredictable trouble. She admitted that while she had hoped to avoid a fight, she now had no other option. As their eyes met, the tension between them grew, but the confrontation was interrupted by Gordon's sudden arrival. He told Keed she was free to leave, claiming her fate was of no interest to him while adding a dismissive comment about humanity. Though shocked and confused by their sudden indifference, Keed suspected a hidden motive was at play. Nevertheless, she decided to seize the opportunity, planning to escape the tower and survive the Ursus Mountains long enough to reach Horton Walk for reinforcements. However, as she sprinted toward the door and touched it, a powerful aura threw her violently to the ground. Gordon calmly noted that the tower itself prevents anyone not authorized by the Demon King from exiting. Ignoring the danger, Ernan approached the door. Despite Gordon's warning that she might face severe consequences for touching it, she opened the gate effortlessly. While a stunned Gordon watched, a confused Ernan awkwardly admitted she simply felt capable of opening it before trying to close it again. At that exact moment, Dias appeared from outside, pushing the door open with a smirk and asking if Ernan was finally trying to run away. After Gordon acknowledged his return, the Demon King surveyed the room and asked what had been going on in his absence. Later, in the Demon King's private quarters, Dias ordered Gordon to throw Princess Keed into the underground dungeon as punishment for her escape attempt. After accepting the task, Gordon voiced his concern about Ernan, pointing out that she had managed to open the main gate despite the tower's restrictions. Dias explained that the tower already recognized her as one of its own members, a revelation that deeply surprised Gordon. Observing her through a system window, Dias reflected that her contract with a high-ranked spirit would make surviving Ursus alone quite easy. He questioned her true intentions, wondering why she hadn't fled while he was away for so long. The scene then moved to the tower's dark dungeon, where Keed sat imprisoned. When Ernan came to visit, she reminded the captive that she had already warned her against trying to escape. Keed, however, remained deeply suspicious, arguing that kindness always comes with a hidden motive. Convinced that the Demon King was plotting something, she tried to warn Ernan about the danger they were in. Ernan suddenly glanced upward as if she knew Dias was observing her through the system window. She calmly explained that she had remained at the tower by choice, a revelation that shocked both Keed and the watching Dias. He was particularly struck by how she looked directly toward him, seemingly aware of his gaze. Ernan then confessed her true feelings, admitting that while she was initially kidnapped, she chose not to return because she despised the royal palace, her family, and her father. As Keed struggled to process this confession, Berger wondered if those words were specifically meant for him. Keed pointed out that Ernan was the most talented among all the Hilderan royals and questioned why a future queen would trade a brilliant destiny to serve a demon king. In response, Ernan highlighted a strange reality. Despite the Hilderan family having 62 children, the most on the continent, none were famous besides her. Confusion grew as Keed argued that the official number was 28, but Ernan clarified that while the public figure was indeed 28, the emperor alone knew the full truth. She suggested Keed ask him herself, though Keed feared such a secret would ruin the kingdom's honor. Giggling, Ernan teased the embarrassed Keed, noting that a princess fleeing an arranged marriage shouldn't worry so much about family reputation. Before leaving, Ernan told her she was joking and promised to return the next day. Reflecting on these events, Deus realized he had stumbled upon a secret known only to high-ranking royals. He then instructed Gordon to prepare Ernan for a trip to find spirit herbs. Shortly after, in the Urzist Mountains, a water spirit and its companions searched for plants with great excitement. Ernan tried to keep them in check, mentioning that the spirits were restless after being indoors for so long, much like Deus had been during his frequent travels. However, the mood shifted instantly when Deus called her name. With a dark expression, he summoned an aura flame and demanded that she reveal her hidden secrets. As Ernan stood frozen by his intense presence, a distant observer watched through a telescope, finally identifying Bershadias as the demon king of the Urzist Mountains.